Night falls, not with noise, but with stillness. A kind of velvet silence, thick and slow, that spreads itself across the sky like an old friend returned. In that silence, stars arrive, not suddenly, but with the subtlety of memory. They appear one by one, scattered across the endless black like whispers pressed into paper. Science would call them plasma, light years away, fusing hydrogen into helium, flaming spheres imprisoned by gravity and time. But something deeper insists that stars are more than science. Consider the vastness. Consider the way those small lights, tiny pricks in the curtain of night, have been watching long before language knew how to say wonder. Civilizations long buried beneath sand and ocean once tilted their faces toward them, drawing lines between their glow to form gods, beasts, and stories. The stars accepted it all. The stars said nothing. Maybe that's the point. Perhaps stars are not burning for survival, but for remembrance. Not explosions of matter, but vessels of spirit. Lanterns lit by souls no longer walking the earth, suspended in the heavens as sentinels of what once was. And if souls do linger beyond the body, wouldn't they need some place to go, some perch from which to keep watch? A star does not rush. It waits. Even its light, the fastest thing known, takes years to arrive. And by the time it does, the source may be gone. Still, the light remains, crossing space to reach the eyes of one looking up from a quiet earth. That light is ancient. That light is loyal. And that loyalty does not flicker in vain. There is something sacred about this watching. In the silence of night, when the world is stripped of noise and artificial light, there is a feeling that something is looking back. Not a god, not an alien, not even a person, but a presence, something vast and warm and old. And this presence does not demand attention. It simply glows. It does not intervene. It observes. And in its observation, something within the heart feels less alone. Some stars form clusters, close-knit families of fire. Others drift solitary in the black, content in their distance. Both are beautiful. Some burn blue and fast, others red and slow. Some end in quiet collapses. Some explode and create the seeds of new galaxies. There is no single story for a star. Perhaps that too is a message. That existence needs no singular form to be meaningful. That even in death, something can still shine across time. On certain nights, when clouds are scarce and the air is cold and dry, the stars seem closer, as if the veil between dimensions has thinned. On those nights, one could imagine each glimmer as a candle lit in memory. For a mother's soft voice, for a father's sacrifice, for a child lost before their time, for an artist whose final work was never seen. Each light a note in the great song of those who came before. To lie beneath that sky and wonder is to participate in something larger than flesh, not to ask for answers, but to feel the presence of eternity. A star does not explain itself, nor should it. Explanation dissolves mystery, and mystery is a language older than words. There are moments when a soul needs no answer, only a reminder that the universe holds space for remembrance. And the stars remember. They have watched lovers part at train stations, soldiers return to empty homes, children born beneath fragile hospital lights. They have seen first steps and final breaths. They do not judge. They do not interfere. They carry their glow like monks carrying incense, faithful in silence. One star may blink out, its light swallowed by time. But another will rise, and another, and another. The sky is never truly empty, and neither is the heart of the world. Every act of love continues echoing, long after the faces have faded. A gesture given in love, no matter how small, lives beyond the moment. A hand reaching out, a door held open, a tear wiped without a word, a blanket tucked around cold shoulders in the dark. These moments are not noise. They are not shouts or applause. They are echoes, soft, enduring ripples that travel through time like light through water, altering everything they touch without demanding to be seen. Faces change, bodies age, names are forgotten, and voices fade from memory. But love does not vanish with the flesh. It embeds itself into fabric, woven into the way someone speaks more gently to strangers, the way someone dares to try again after heartbreak, the way someone believes the world might still be kind. That belief often did not begin in that person. It was planted, once, long ago, by a gesture no one else noticed. The world does not run on progress or profit. It runs on these invisible echoes. They shape destinies. A teacher staying after class for one child who never forgets the moment someone believed in them. A friend who picked up the phone on the worst night of someone's life. A stranger's smile at just the right time. These are not small. These are seismic. Entire lives bend around them. And though the faces that gave those gifts may be gone, the love remains. Passed like flame from candle to candle, often without knowing the source. A grandmother holds a baby and sings a lullaby she was once sung. A traveler offers food to someone hungry because long ago a meal was shared with them. A man forgives someone who harmed him because in a distant part of memory he recalls the softness of being forgiven. Love is not only an emotion, it is a structure, an architecture of connection that survives the crumbling of names and titles. Wars may burn libraries, and time may erase photos, but love imprints itself elsewhere. Into the behavior, the reflex, the instinct to care when there's nothing to gain. Even love that was never returned still echoes. The act of offering love changes the one who gives it. To love, even without reward, sharpens the soul into something softer and more luminous. It cultivates patience. It stretches the heart beyond the boundaries of pride. It makes space for grace. And in the most silent places, where grief lives and loneliness lingers, the echo of past love can be heard, not as noise, but as warmth. A warmth that arises from nowhere, reminding the bones that something once mattered deeply, that the heart once opened itself and was not afraid. The world is filled with the ghosts of kindness, not haunting, but guiding. Love does not require acknowledgement to be real. A letter never sent, a secret act of service, a prayer whispered in solitude for someone far away. These things do not vanish. They become architecture in the unseen. They become reasons someone keeps going, even when all seems lost. When a child wraps arms around a tired parent without being asked. When an elder takes the time to listen to someone young and unsure. When a person apologizes even though it stings. These are echoes, meeting echoes. The past arriving in the present, dressed in new skin. And even unspoken love finds its way into the future. The effort to become better, kinder, softer, for the sake of someone who once mattered, can shape generations. A person heals a wound, so it isn't passed to the next. That too is an echo, and it is made of love. Long after names are forgotten, and stories are no longer told around fire or table, the acts of love linger. They float between conversations. They rise in songs. They sit beside those who feel unseen and remind them, gently, that they are not alone. What began with one soul choosing compassion becomes a movement across time. Unrecorded, unnoticed, but never lost. No version of a moment ever repeats itself. Each second is a snowflake melting before it's understood. Time does not circle back. Even the most identical of conditions, same sky, same light, same conversation, will never unfold again in precisely the same way. The world does not clone its minutes. Each second passes like breath on glass, briefly there, briefly visible, and then gone without trace. A moment is born, and dies so quickly that even awareness struggles to meet it in time. Like a snowflake falling into a warm palm, it arrives delicate, complex, irreproducible, and is gone before its full pattern is understood. This truth can be both devastating and divine. Devastating because it means no joy can be perfectly preserved. No laughter ever replays with the same tone. No touch repeats with the same tenderness. No goodbye is ever quite the same as the last. Everything moves. Nothing pauses. The kiss shared at twilight. The gaze held in silence. The tear that dropped into an open hand. These belong to a moment that cannot return. They live in memory, but not in time. And yet, this very vanishing is what makes life sacred. If every second is a snowflake, then every second is also a wonder. Repetition is illusion. Even routine disguises change. The same walk taken every morning holds an infinite variety beneath its surface. The slight shift of breeze, a new scent in the air, a different rhythm to the footfall. In the kitchen, the cup placed on the counter does not echo the motion of yesterday. The water boils again, but never in the same light. A sigh is released with a subtly altered meaning. The air itself has changed composition, shifted in its whisper. Even in the stillest rooms, time is a sculptor. The angle of sunlight filtering through a curtain, unique. The dust, caught in its beam, unrepeatable. A heartbeat thudding in the chest, never in quite the same tempo. A word spoken with a slightly different breath. A pause that lasts longer this time, stretching the sentence in an entirely new direction. Each flicker of existence is fleeting and final. Trying to hold a moment is like trying to collect steam with bare hands. It slips, disappears, becomes something else. Cameras attempt to capture it. Journals try to freeze it in language. Songs echo its essence. But the real moment, the full complexity of sensation, thought, feeling, light, sound, air, presence, is already gone. What remains is impression, not replication. This impermanence is not a cruelty. It is a design. The snowflake falls, not to be preserved, but to fulfill its form for a brief shimmer of existence. To ask a moment to stay forever is to ask a flame not to flicker. Moments must pass so that others may arrive. The sacred cannot be mass-produced. And what a mercy that is. For if no moment ever repeats, then no sorrow remains fixed either. Pain, though piercing, is also snow. It melts. Even grief, as heavy as mountains, shifts with time, grain by grain, leaving space for light to seep through once again. The memory may remain, but its edge blunts, its weight disperses. The second that breaks a heart is not the second that will end it. Something else is always forming beneath the melt. Each breath drawn is a chance not to redo, but to newly encounter. To witness what is fresh within the familiar. A song heard for the 100th time can still stir a tear, not because it repeats, but because the listener has changed. The listener of today is not the listener of last week. The soul constantly rewrites itself with each passing second. Life is not a loop. It is a stream. It cannot be stepped in twice in the same place, for both stream and step are already changed. The hands raised to the sky today do not belong to the same body or spirit as those raised yesterday. Growth is occurring invisibly, even in stillness. Cells renew, thoughts shift, longings deepen or disappear. The world continues sculpting with unseen tools. In this truth, a quiet freedom exists. There is no obligation to recreate a perfect past. The most precious moment has already passed, and that is not a loss, but a blessing. Nothing more is required than presence, not to hold, but to witness, not to preserve, but to receive. And so, the snowflakes fall, melting before full appreciation, dissolving before analysis, and in their brief dance from sky to earth, they offer a final, silent truth. The present is not a possession, but a passing gift. The moon remains, whether seen or hidden, pulling oceans with invisible hands. In the quiet, above rooftops and treetops, a presence lingers. Sometimes it glows with silver pride. Sometimes it disappears entirely behind clouds, or daylight or shadow. But seen or unseen, it remains. The moon does not demand attention. Its power does not rely on witness. The moon governs without voice. It moves oceans with a gravity not seen, only felt. Whole tides respond to its nearness. Waters rise in soft obedience, retreat in silence, swell in rhythm with its orbit, all without a single command, all without a single word. This silent pull speaks louder than thunder. Influence need not roar. Real power often exists in the unnoticed, a force moving quietly, not to control, but to harmonize. The moon pulls not out of dominance, but out of design. A celestial dance, ancient and precise. Even in darkness, the moon does not vanish. Hidden does not mean absent. Behind the curtain of clouds or the brilliance of sunlight, it still moves, still watches, still shapes the earth's waters, and in turn, the body's own tides. Internal rhythms responding unknowingly to its distance and phase. Dreams shift, emotions stir, sleep deepens, or breaks beneath its unseen influence. Those who look skyward during night walks, those who sit on porches in solitude, often turn their gaze upward, not seeking answers, but comfort. The moon offers no solutions, no instructions, only presence. A gentle reminder that something constant exists, even in the changing. It waxes and wanes, yet never loses itself. From sliver to full, to vanish to reborn, it shows that transformation is not loss. A crescent is not less than a whole. Absence is not death. The cycle continues, quietly, beautifully, without apology. Consistency exists not in shape, but in return. And there is beauty in that return. The rhythm of phases marks time in a way deeper than calendars. Children are born, lovers reunited, ancestors buried beneath its gaze. Across generations, it remains the same moon, timeless and timely, ancient yet never tired. Even wolves in folklore and forest sing to it, not because they expect an answer, but because something in its glow ignites a voice in the wild. The moon listens without responding. But in its silence, something stirs. Unlike the sun, which commands the day with blinding clarity, the moon whispers through shadows. It does not seek dominance. It illuminates without invading. It holds space for softness. It is the patron of reflection, of pause, of the in-between. A symbol not of arrival, but of patience. The same moon seen through a city window is seen through desert wind, through mountaintop fog, through prison bars, through telescope lenses, through tears, through hope. It is a witness to the human condition in all its forms, unchanged by praise, unbothered by disbelief. Its gravity never asks to be noticed. Its influence never demands to be proven. It simply exists, and in its silent persistence, it moves mountains of water and hearts. Somewhere in time, a future exists that holds every answer now unknown. Not every question is meant to be answered in the moment it arises. Some are seeds planted not for the next season, but for a time so distant it cannot be named. The mind may press for clarity, the heart may ache for certainty, and the present may feel like a maze made of mist. Yet, even in the absence of understanding, time continues building something quietly ahead. There is a future, unformed, unseen, that already cradles the answers now sought in silence. This idea bends thought in strange directions. Imagine a moment, years from now, where every current doubt has dissolved into gentle recognition. Not because anything external shouted a solution, but because the slow unfolding of experience revealed patterns previously hidden. Just as a caterpillar knows nothing of wings while still crawling through leaves, the present self may walk through fog, unaware of the wings already waiting in some unopened hour. Time is a strange sculptor. It reveals meaning only when the clay has cooled. A tragedy that bruises the spirit today may, in the distant weave of context, become the very thread that stitched together strength, insight, or a completely altered path. The pain may not lessen, but its purpose may glow with unexpected light. That light, however, does not shine backward. It waits ahead. There is no urgency in truth. It does not run from the seeker. It waits until the seeker is still enough to notice, until the world has changed enough to allow the puzzle pieces to land in their proper place, until eyes, once clouded by longing, become clear enough to see with acceptance instead of desperation. Sometimes the answers aren't missing. They're simply not ready to be heard. Just as a seed cannot be forced open, wisdom cannot be extracted from a moment that has not yet bloomed. Knowledge without timing becomes noise. Revelation given too early becomes burden. There is a sacred rhythm to discovery, one not controlled by willpower or cleverness, but by surrender. Even now, the future is moving quietly, like wind through tall grass. It is arranging encounters, folding time, setting things in motion. Somewhere, perhaps years away, a conversation will unfold with someone not yet known. A book will fall off a shelf in a way that feels orchestrated. A place will be visited where the air smells familiar, despite never having breathed it before. And in that place, something will be remembered, not from the past, but from the truth that's always been waiting. The future is not empty. It is already full, but veiled. Like a theater with curtains drawn. Behind the fabric, the scenes are set, the music tuned, the story written. When the curtain lifts, it will not be the beginning. It will simply be the part where understanding is finally allowed to enter. Somewhere in that future is a hand that has learned how to let go of what now seems unbearable. Somewhere is a smile that knows why today's sorrow had to be felt. Somewhere is a night that holds peace so deep it silences even the most restless thoughts. Those nights do not rush toward the present. They wait patiently, knowing their time will come. The unknown is not the enemy. It is a cradle, a womb for revelation. Not everything is hidden to punish. Some things are hidden to protect. Just as a pearl forms slowly within the oyster's shield, some truths require darkness to develop their luster. Rushing the process would shatter the beauty. What feels like wandering may simply be traveling in a larger circle, one too vast to see from inside. And what feels like silence may be preparation. The orchestra tuning before the grand beginning. The stars aligning behind thick clouds. Movement in places where the eyes cannot follow, but the soul can sense. Someday, a future will arrive quietly, perhaps without grand fanfare. A sunrise will come with colors that match an unspoken longing. And in that light, the questions of today may finally be met not with answers in words, but with understanding in feeling. Not through logic, but through presence. The kind of understanding that cannot be spoken, only lived. And when that moment arrives, it will not erase the journey. It will honor it. Every question asked will echo within the answer. Every lonely hour will become part of the architecture of peace. And the future, once a mystery, will reveal itself not as a distant prize, but as something always approaching with open arms. Tears speak a language only silence understands. There exists a kind of communication that does not pass through lips or arrive through sound. It flows instead from the corners of eyes, in quiet rivers down the skin, carrying meaning too heavy for speech. Tears are not weakness. They are truth, distilled. Not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. A sacred overflow when the body can no longer carry the unspoken. Silence listens where words fail. It does not interrupt. It does not advise. It does not recoil. In its stillness, it becomes a sanctuary. And it is only within this sanctuary that tears feel safe enough to fall. Loud spaces demand explanation. Silence accepts them without question. Each tear carries a history, a tapestry of moments stretched too tightly across the heart. The drop may look simple, but inside it swirls emotion layered like geological strata. Grief from years ago, joy from a fleeting smile, frustration never allowed a voice, compassion for suffering that cannot be eased. These waters do not lie. Even when the mind hides truth from itself, the tear remembers. There is something profound in the way the body creates water as response. It does not bleed. It does not bruise. It releases water, as if returning a portion of itself to the ocean, as if admitting that the soul is partly tide, ebbing and flowing with emotion's pull. Silence does not fix what causes the tear, but it holds space for its unfolding. Like dark soil around a blooming seed, it does not ask the tear to stop. It simply allows it to be. In that allowance, healing begins, not from outside, but from the act of being seen, even if only by stillness. Tears do not always fall in sadness. They may descend in reverence, in awe, in the tender ache of beauty too immense to contain, a sunset too vast, a song that opens an old memory, a scent that recalls someone no longer here. These tears are messengers of depth, reminding that beneath daily rhythms lies an ocean of feeling still alive and waiting. When tears fall unseen, they do not lose their worth. Visibility is not what makes something sacred. A single tear shed in solitude carries the same weight as one cried in a crowded room. Perhaps even more, for it proves the soul's honesty in its most vulnerable form. Silence speaks back to the tear, not with language, but with presence. It wraps itself gently around the moment, saying only, "This is allowed." In a world of noise and demand, that permission is rare. And so, the tear falls, and the silence holds it. And the soul, little by little, softens again. Even after the tear dries, the silence lingers, not as emptiness, but as a companion, the space where reflection enters, where truth finally breathes, where healing begins not by mending, but by allowing what is broken to be broken, without shame. In this quiet exchange, the tear and the silence speak a language that needs no translation. It is the oldest language, the one known even by infants, the one remembered by the body before the mind understands. A language made not of grammar, but of gravity, not of structure, but of surrender. And in that surrender, something returns, not strength, not solution, but softness. The kind of softness that can cradle pain without turning away. The kind of softness that eventually gives birth to peace. Even the harshest winters end with a slow, patient bloom. Cold has a way of convincing the world that warmth has forgotten it. When branches stand bare, stripped of every leaf, and wind howls through empty streets like a lost voice looking for a home, it can seem as though the world is frozen not just in temperature, but in spirit. Days shorten into shadows. The sun hides more often than it reveals, and silence wraps itself around the hours like a second skin. In these moments, the earth seems paused, caught between breaths, waiting without promise. But the waiting is not wasted. Beneath the crust of frozen soil, there is motion too small for the eye. Roots push gently, stubbornly. Seeds sleep, but in their sleep, they gather strength. The ground, cold to the touch, is secretly alive with the quiet rehearsal of what will come. Nothing rushes. Nothing is hurried. Even nature knows that survival is not a sprint, but a slow enduring. The bloom never arrives with a trumpet call. It does not shout. It does not wave banners across the sky. It arrives with softness, a subtle shift in air, a color barely different from the gray, a petal peeking from frostbitten ground. These are not accidents. These are rehearsed acts, timed with patience that human clocks cannot mimic. Nature's calendar runs on resilience, not urgency. Snow may still fall in spring's early weeks, But even that snow melts faster, as though it too is tired of the cold. Ice loses its grip. Streams, once silent under glassy layers, begin to murmur again. The light shifts. The breeze, though still sharp, carries the scent of something tender beneath it. And just as winter began without permission, spring begins without apology. The bloom is not always immediate, and rarely is it neat. Buds may open unevenly. Trees may hesitate before revealing their green. Some flowers bloom only after frost, built to endure the trial before the triumph. These are the survivors, the ones that teach that beauty need not come without struggle. Their petals carry stories of storms. Their stems bend with the memory of weight. What was lost in winter is not forgotten, but repurposed. Dead leaves feed the soil. Fallen branches clear space for sunlight. Even decay serves the bloom. The cycle does not erase the past. It transforms it. Harsh seasons become nourishment for softer ones. The very things that froze the world become the foundation of its rebirth. And so, the bloom is not a beginning, but a continuation, a response, an answer to the question that winter asked with every cold gust: will anything grow again? The answer, spoken by crocus and cherry blossom, is never loud, but always certain. Yes, even this can grow again. Even now. Even here. Patience is written into the DNA of the bloom. There is no shame in the slowness. Growth is not linear. Some flowers appear quickly. Others take weeks. Some never bloom at all until the second or third spring. Still, the effort remains sacred. No rush, no race, only rhythm. And when the bloom finally opens fully, when color returns with abandon, and the scent of life fills the air, it is not only a season that has changed, it is a testament, a living proof that what once felt permanent was only passing through. That cold is not the enemy, but the sculptor of depth. The harshest winters do not win. They teach. And their final lesson is always this: bloom anyway. Memories often linger longer than the people who made them. There is a silence that follows parting. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of echo. Long after the voice has faded, the sound still circles within the walls. Long after the hands have let go, their warmth clings to fabric, to doorknobs, to coffee cups no longer used. People come and go, but memory is not governed by time. It does not pack up and leave with the departing. It stays, quietly stitching itself into the fabric of the everyday. A person can vanish in minutes, through distance, decision, or death. But memory is slower, more patient. It chooses what to carry forward. A laugh at the wrong moment. The way sunlight caught their hair one morning. A phrase they always repeated, now forever echoing in the back of the mind. These fragments float, not in chronological order, but in emotional weight. The ordinary becomes sacred. A jacket left behind. A note written in haste. A scent that appears in a place where it has no reason to be. And sometimes, memory sharpens with absence. The further away the source drifts, the clearer the details seem to become. Not because the mind is exact, but because the heart is careful. It preserves what matters, even if the facts blur. What remains is not always truth, but it is always real. It is the version of a person that the soul continues to carry. Rooms remember, objects remember. The world is not made of neutral matter. It absorbs presence. A favorite song played on a quiet evening does not sound the same after someone is gone. It becomes a bridge, a tether to a version of reality that once included someone now missing. That bridge is both gift and wound. Crossing it brings comfort and ache in equal measure. Memories are not just records. They are living things. They breathe. They evolve. What once hurt may now bring a smile. What once brought joy may now feel sharp. The same memory can shift tone across years, reflecting the growth of the heart that holds it. And some memories lie dormant for decades, only to be triggered by a smell, a phrase, a place not visited in years. In that moment, time folds. The past becomes present, if only for a second. Sometimes memories are kinder than the people who made them. Sometimes they are harsher. Sometimes they carry a purity that real life never quite matched. That's the paradox of memory. It is both mirror and mirage. It reveals and it reshapes. It tells stories with a tone that fits the season in which it is recalled. And yet, despite its flaws, it is loyal. It refuses to forget entirely. Even pain finds a strange comfort in memory. The sharpness of loss confirms that something once mattered. That love, once given, was real. Memory becomes the shrine where connection continues. Not in conversation, not in presence, but in resonance. A look at the sky, and the thought returns. They once looked at this same moon. They once stood under this same sky. The distance does not erase the alignment. Some memories arrive uninvited. Others are summoned in solitude, drawn like sacred relics from the vault of the mind. They are revisited like old letters, sometimes cherished, sometimes reopened with trembling hands. Not all are welcome, but all have their reason. Even the painful ones hold lessons, shadows that define the shape of light. And in the quietest hours, when the world has turned away and the noise has settled into hush, memory becomes a companion. Not to replace the person once known, but to honor them, to remind that existence is not limited to the physical. That presence can extend beyond presence. Eventually, people fade, voices lose their edges, faces blur at the corners, but something stays, a trace, a warmth, a sense, a memory that refuses to release its grip. That memory walks alongside life, quietly, faithfully, asking nothing but to be remembered. And perhaps that is what remains when everything else is gone. A series of flickering moments strung together like lanterns in the dark. Not enough to light the entire path, but enough to guide the next step. Perhaps reality is the dream, and sleep is the real awakening. Eyes open each morning and greet a world already in motion. Cars moving, clocks ticking, people speaking in patterns learned long ago. Coffee brews, lights flicker on. Responsibilities arrange themselves like stepping stones, leading from one hour to the next. This is the waking world, or so it seems. Concrete, tangible, measurable. And yet, beneath the rhythms and the rituals, a question often hums low beneath the surface. What if this isn't the real? Sleep begins with the closing of lids, but what truly closes? The external vision ceases, but inward doors swing wide. Dreams begin, not with sight, but with surrender. A single drift, and suddenly the rules of waking dissolve. Time bends. The impossible becomes ordinary. A conversation with a lost loved one feels more vivid than any meeting held in daylight. A sky filled with colors never seen before expands like breath. And in these nocturnal realms, there is no doubt about their truth. While inside them, they feel more than imagined. They feel known. Perhaps reality is not the one where flesh feels cold and bills arrive in envelopes. Perhaps the true world is the one where the mind is free from gravity and the heart speaks without words. In dreams, a person can fly without wings, speak without sound, feel without touch. Emotions become landscapes, and thoughts build cities. There is no waiting, no need for logic to approve. Things happen not because they make sense, but because they must. The waking world insists on evidence. Sleep asks only trust. Reality demands consistency. Dreams offer transformation. And yet, for all their differences, the line between the two is thinner than glass. One blink, one shift in brainwaves. The real becomes the imagined, and the imagined becomes the real. What makes a world real? Is it solidity? If so, then how does one explain the ache felt after a dream of goodbye? or the joy of holding someone who no longer walks the earth. That ache lingers into daylight. It shapes mood, behavior, thought. And if something can alter the waking world, how can it be considered false? Maybe sleep is not the escape, but the entry point. Maybe the dream is not a distortion, but a remembering. A return to something ancient and true, where consciousness wanders freely through dimensions without asking for permission. In that realm, faces not seen for decades may appear beside those never met. Symbols unfold like riddles, speaking in a language the soul understands, even when the mind forgets. And if sleep is the real awakening, then reality itself is the dream shared by the many. A collective illusion stabilized by agreement. Work, language, gravity, law, consensual symbols. Necessary for survival, perhaps, but not always the truest part of being. Children know this instinctively. Watch them speak with invisible friends, build entire kingdoms from twigs, declare themselves kings or queens or creatures without hesitation. Their play is not fiction. It is their reality, rich and wild and complete. Over time, that reality is traded for one more accepted, more defined. But the trade comes at a cost. The forgetting of the deeper dream. The one where anything is possible because nothing is fixed. Sleep returns that gift. Every night, the veil lifts. The soul floats into the soft unknown, where names mean nothing and intuition reigns. There are no passwords, no calendars, only images, feelings, movements through space not bound by form. And perhaps the most telling truth is this: no one teaches how to dream. It is not learned, it is not studied, it is remembered. From birth, it is there. From the very beginning, the sleeping world welcomes like an old friend. It asks nothing but trust. And in return, it gives glimpses of something just beyond understanding. Perhaps one day, waking will be seen as the smaller version of reality, a single chamber in a much larger house. Sleep opens the other doors, and dreams are not just flickers of imagination, but messages, echoes of a greater self watching through the mirror of time. The real question may not be what is real, but what matters. And if dreams change hearts, reveal secrets, bring peace, or stir ancient wisdom, then they are as real as any morning. Perhaps even more. So when sleep arrives, and the body surrenders to stillness, a passage opens, not into darkness, but into another kind of light, the kind that glows behind the eyes, the kind that knows without knowing how. And in that light, the dream begins again. Or perhaps, the dream ends, and the truth begins. Even a broken clock holds truth, twice a day, without effort. Imperfection does not erase value. A crack in porcelain does not strip it of beauty. A misstep in rhythm does not silence the song. And even a clock, long stopped, hands frozen in refusal to move, still tells the correct time, twice each day. In its stillness, there remains alignment. Accuracy that asks for nothing. Truth that arrives without effort. There is something quietly magnificent in that. A broken thing, forgotten by many, left to gather dust or hang as decoration, becomes, if only for a moment, perfectly right. Without repair, without intention, its failure becomes irrelevant. Time circles back to it. And the world, for 2 small moments, agrees with it entirely. This speaks to more than just timepieces. It speaks to the unseen dignity in things left behind, the grace of the flawed, the unexpected ways truth returns, even to what appears useless or wrong. Not all value comes from function. Some comes from the mystery of timing, from the larger cycles moving around the small. The clock that no longer ticks becomes a symbol. It is not racing forward, but it is not gone. It is paused, and in that pause, it becomes a mirror, reminding that even stasis has a place in the flow. Even silence can be timely. even stillness can align with truth. People chase precision. Systems are built on measurement, correctness, and efficiency. But nature does not rush. The moon does not move faster to please the tide. Mountains do not apologize for standing still. The broken clock joins their ranks, not in weakness, but in surrender. It holds its position. It remains. And what if wisdom looks more like that clock than the constantly running one? What if the soul, weary from endless ticking, longs not for movement, but for meaning? Not for constant updates, but for deep stillness that holds something true, even if only for a moment. Consider all the things labeled as broken: tools, beliefs, people, hearts, dismissed because they no longer perform as expected. But if time itself circles back to a silent machine and meets it in agreement, then what else might the world be overlooking? What else still holds truth, even while appearing to fail? A broken clock becomes holy, if only for those 2 moments a day, when its arms align perfectly with the hour, the minute, the world. When, in the great turning of time, it becomes not late or early, but exact. In that sliver of alignment, its value is undeniable. And this is not earned. The clock does not strive. It does not anticipate. It does not fight for relevance. It simply waits, and truth finds it anyway. Not all purpose looks like progress. Not all meaning is movement. There is beauty in timing, not just in function. And sometimes, what seems broken is simply out of step, waiting for the right moment to fall back into rhythm. So let the broken things remain. Let them rest. Let them exist without demand. Their time will come, not by force, not by fixing, but by the quiet return of alignment. Even the stopped hands tell the truth, twice a day. Kindness travels in quiet ways, sometimes through thoughts never spoken aloud. The loudest gestures are not always the ones that leave the deepest mark. Some forms of kindness move in silence, pass without recognition, and ripple through time in ways the giver may never witness. A glance held just a moment longer, a seat given without ceremony, a thought offered like a prayer in the privacy of a restless night. These are the threads that quietly stitch the fabric of human connection. Kindness is not always an act. Sometimes it is restraint. The word not said. The judgment withheld. The tone softened at the last second. These invisible choices go unnoticed by most, but they are small miracles of self-control, compassion, and inner gentleness. They cost nothing to perform, and yet they often come at the highest internal price, choosing empathy over reaction, peace over pride. There are moments where the most loving thing is to say nothing, not out of neglect, but reverence. Some pain cannot be fixed. Some confusion cannot be solved. In these moments, presence becomes the only true kindness. A person sitting silently beside someone breaking, not trying to glue the pieces, but simply offering stillness as a sanctuary. That is kindness in its most distilled form. There are thoughts never spoken that change everything. Wishes for someone's healing whispered under breath. Forgiveness given without announcement. Hopes sent out like lanterns into the night sky with no expectation of return. These are the silent offerings that drift between souls like warm air, unseen but undeniably felt. They move through the world like light through water, touching places words could never reach. Kindness does not require an audience. In fact, it often disappears in the spotlight. Its truest form flourishes in shadows, in passing, in simplicity. An anonymous gift, a bill quietly paid, a message deleted before being sent, because the tone was sharp, and the heart, upon reflection, softened. These are not acts meant to impress. They are meant to preserve a gentler world. The world is built on countless unseen mercies. The stranger who picked up something dropped and kept walking. The teacher who stayed a little later. The neighbor who cleared snow without knocking. None of these stories make headlines, but they form the quiet background of existence, the ambient glow of human goodness. And not all kindness is directed outward. Sometimes it begins inside, an encouraging thought toward one's own reflection, a small grace given after a mistake, a gentle reminder that growth takes time. These moments do not echo through halls, but they ripple through lifetimes. Self-kindness teaches the soul how to give without depletion. It is not selfishness. It is the first watering of a flower that will bloom for others. In quiet rooms, thoughts form like clouds. Some stay, some drift. But every kind thought, whether expressed or not, changes something in the air. There is a current of warmth that passes through the human world, even in its darkest corners. This current is not powered by grand gestures, but by whispers of goodness moving silently between hearts. Kindness does not expire. A word spoken decades ago can still warm a person today. A letter, written but never sent, may still hold meaning in its intention. Time does not dull the weight of a moment given in compassion. In fact, time often reveals the full depth of kindness only after it has passed. Its glow remains long after the moment ends, like perfume lingering in an empty room. Sometimes a kind act is forgotten by the one who gave it, but remembered forever by the one who received it. A smile from a stranger that kept someone from falling apart. A small compliment that anchored someone on a hard day. The giver moves on, unaware, but the receiver carries it forward, perhaps even passing it on, unknowing. In this way, kindness becomes immortal. And thoughts, those silent companions of the soul, are often the birthplace of kindness. Not every kind thought becomes action, but every kind thought shapes the heart. A world full of kind thoughts, even unspoken ones, becomes a softer place. It is not weakness, it is quiet strength. The kind that does not seek reward, but simply honors the dignity in all things. Kindness is never wasted. It may not change the world in thunder, but it changes the moment in peace. And peace, moment by moment, becomes the foundation of everything. A falling leaf is never in a hurry, yet always on time. Nothing in nature rushes. The trees do not call out to the leaf, asking it to stay longer. The wind does not demand it fall faster. The leaf lets go when it is ready, drifting slowly, weightlessly, as if savoring its final descent. It does not fight gravity, nor resist the pull of time. It moves with grace, not because it is told how, but because it has learned to trust the rhythm. The fall is not a failure. It is a completion, a fulfillment of the cycle, from bud to blossom, green to gold, life to release. The leaf has taken in sunlight, weathered storms, offered shade, and whispered in the breeze. It has done its work, and now it lets go, not with fear, but with surrender. Not because it has been forced, but because the moment has arrived. There is wisdom in that drift. It teaches that timing is not always a matter of urgency. Some arrivals are slow, some departures softer than silence. The most profound transitions often happen without fanfare. No clocks, no deadlines. Only the quiet agreement between the leaf and the wind. Now. The leaf does not compare itself to others. It does not watch which leaf falls first or last. It does not panic at its descent. Each falls when the time is right, guided not by pressure, but by inner readiness. Some cling a little longer, others release early. All are correct. All are in tune with something deeper than schedule. And the descent itself is not merely an end. It is a dance, a spiral, a choreography of air and color. It moves with elegance, with slowness, with complete trust. There is no clinging, no resisting, only movement. And in that movement, something sacred happens. The moment aligns with the universe. What seems like a fall is also a return. The leaf touches ground, not as a loss, but as a contribution. It becomes part of the soil, the nourishment for roots. It decays, and in doing so, it feeds the next generation. The fall is not failure, it is transformation. It is how the forest survives, how life begins again. No part of the journey is wasted. The stillness on the branch, the fluttering descent, the rest on the ground, each phase belongs. Nothing is out of place. Nothing is late. Everything is perfectly timed in a world that trusts its own unfolding. The falling leaf carries a truth that the world often forgets. Not all movement must be fast to be meaningful. Not all progress is measured in urgency. Some of the most beautiful transitions happen in silence, in patience, in slowness. And what is slow is often lasting. To watch a leaf fall is to witness surrender in its purest form. No panic, no control, just motion guided by nature, by wind, by timing that needs no approval. It knows when to let go. It knows that falling is not failing. It knows that arriving at the earth is not the end, but the beginning of something else entirely. Time does not push the leaf. Time waits for it. And when the moment comes, it falls. Not too soon. Not too late. Always, somehow, on time. The past is a mirror that doesn't reflect the full story. Looking back can feel like opening an old book, pages yellowed, familiar lines worn into memory, certain moments underlined by emotion rather than accuracy. The past is not a recording. It is a reflection. And like any mirror, it shows only part of the picture. What stands before it, what light allows, what the angle permits. It cannot reveal what lies just outside the frame. Memories feel whole, but they are fragments. Sensations stitched together with emotion. Faces that once smiled, now frozen in place, disconnected from their full context. A decision once made under pressure, now judged without its original weight. Glimpses become definitions. A single hour becomes the symbol of a year. A single mistake becomes the shadow cast over a decade. But mirrors, by their nature, reverse. Left becomes right. Right becomes left. And what looks exact is never quite so. The mind looks at the past as if it were a map, forgetting it is more like a painting, colored by interpretation, altered by distance, framed by feeling. Even silence gets misread. Even joy gets misremembered. And yet, the past has gravity. It pulls with a strange force. Not because it demands to be relived, but because the heart longs to understand what shaped it, longs to turn backward and find logic in the chaos. A reason for the detour. A thread connecting the pain to the person now present. But not every detail is visible. Some moments were lived in fog. Others passed unnoticed until they returned in dreams, years later, wearing new meaning. People once seen as villains were carrying burdens hidden behind their anger. Decisions once regretted turn out to have carved the exact path needed for something greater to arrive. The mirror does not lie, but it does not reveal everything either. It cannot show what was in the other room. It cannot echo the words never spoken. It cannot reveal the intentions behind a stare, the fear behind a silence, the love that stayed hidden in a single hesitant gesture. What it offers is true, but not the whole truth. To study the past is to walk through a gallery of ghosts, some welcome, some haunting, some misunderstood, but all of them incomplete. And still, there is something sacred in looking, not to find perfection, not to erase regret, but to see with softer eyes, eyes that recognize the limits of memory, the fallibility of judgment, the mystery of what really happened versus what was believed. And sometimes, what is needed is not to understand the past, but to forgive its partialness, to stop demanding it be more than it was, to let it stand as a mirror that can only reflect what it was given, and nothing more. There is a freedom in that, a release. The recognition that no version of the past will ever be whole, and no amount of staring into it will complete the puzzle. The full story does not live behind. It lives in what the reflection inspired, in the choices made afterward, in the direction taken once the mirror was turned away from. The past is not the enemy. It is a teacher with a limited voice. It speaks in riddles and silence and echoes. And the lesson is not always found in the facts, but in the reflection's imperfections, the places where the story goes quiet, where the mirror blurs. And in that blur, the present steps in, not to replace, but to continue the story where the mirror leaves off. Storms leave, but not before teaching the sky how to soften. Not all lessons come with calm. Some arrive with thunder, with skies torn open, with wind that shakes the bones of trees, and rain that strikes like memory. Storms do not ask permission. They do not wait for welcome. They enter unannounced, spilling chaos into the quiet. And yet, they are not senseless. They carry something with them that only the aftermath reveals. Before the storm, the sky is often silent, too still, air thick with tension, light uncertain. A hush falls across the land, as if the world itself is bracing. Then it begins. The distant rumble, the flicker, the wind gathering breath. The pressure changes. The world narrows into the now. During the storm, there is no space for planning, only instinct. The moment takes over. The sound of rain drowns out thought. Branches sway like dancers caught in a wild rhythm. Windows tremble. Power flickers. Everything vulnerable is exposed. And yet, everything essential endures. But it is in the leaving that the storm reveals its real message. The sky does not return to what it was. It becomes something else entirely, cleansed, sobered, softened. Clouds part in slow surrender. Light returns, not in its old sharpness, but in a new gentleness. The world smells different, damp, raw, alive. The ground drinks, the trees shine with wet resilience. Birds emerge cautiously, as if the storm left behind a new kind of silence. One filled with reverence, not fear. The kind of silence that comes only after noise has said everything it needed to. Storms clear more than air. They clear illusion. They show what bends and what breaks. They wash away what was clinging to survival. Dead limbs fall. Weak structures collapse. But beneath the destruction, there is honesty. Nothing remains that was not strong enough to stay. And from that clearing, something new begins. The sky learns softness through the storm. Not gentleness by avoidance, but gentleness by survival. Not the softness of naivety, but the softness of strength honed through turmoil. The light that returns is not the same light. It has passed through darkness. It has learned how to return without burning. There is a kind of humility that only storms can teach. A reminder that control is a fragile illusion. That no matter how ordered life may seem, nature still holds the final word. And within that chaos, there is something sacred, a rebalancing, a renewal. Some storms are short, others linger, but all pass. None stay forever. Their power is in their transience. They come to clear, to shift, to stir what has settled too long. And in their wake, something quieter, wiser, and more open emerges. The sky holds both the storm and the softness. It does not choose one over the other. It honors both. It allows rage and stillness to coexist. It transforms not by staying the same, but by letting each season leave its mark. And so, the storm ends. The sky breathes. The earth dries. Life continues, not untouched, but deepened. Time bends strangely when awe returns to the smallest things. The ticking of time feels constant, unrelenting, measured, precise. Clocks march forward, 1 second following the next like soldiers in line. Days blend into weeks, marked by deadlines, alarms, and routines. But something happens when the gaze softens, when attention shifts from the grand to the quiet. from the urgent to the unnoticed. Time, once rigid, begins to stretch and swirl. The smallest things take on a kind of gravity, and awe moves in like light through a window that had long been covered. A drop of water clinging to the edge of a leaf holds a universe in its curved reflection. A ray of sunlight crossing the floor touches the dust and turns it golden, as if each speck has waited an eternity to be seen. The steam rising from a cup curls like breath, like memory, like something almost trying to speak. These are not loud moments. They do not announce their arrival. But when attention turns toward them, time responds not with its usual rhythm, but with something slower, something sacred. Awe is not reserved for mountaintops or lightning storms. It waits quietly in the spaces between, in the sound of a page turning, in the way a shadow moves slowly across a wall, in the sudden realization that a tree has bloomed overnight without ceremony. These small wonders, so often missed, carry a weight disproportionate to their size. They shift perception. They alter the flow of time, not in science, but in spirit. When awe returns, the body relaxes, the heart opens, the mind quiets. The present moment, often used as a hallway to the next task, becomes a cathedral. Silence becomes a language. Stillness becomes full. Time no longer pushes. It holds, like the breath that lingers before a kiss, like the pause before the first note of a song. There is no race in awe, no hierarchy. A child watching an ant carry a crumb understands this without needing to explain it. Wonder flattens time, stretches it into something soft and slow and deeply alive. The smallest things become portals into something vast. A breeze through curtains becomes not just air, but a presence. A candle flame, flickering without concern for its purpose, becomes a living metaphor for fragility and grace. And the strange thing is, these things never left. The flower blooming in the crack of the pavement, the rustle of dry leaves under a footstep, the swirl of milk in tea, all of it has been here, waiting patiently to be seen again. Time did not change. Attention did, and attention has always been the key to wonder. Even memory shifts under awe's touch. A moment of stillness remembered years later, watching dust in sunlight, listening to distant thunder, holding a warm bowl of soup, can feel more real than the events that crowded around it. Time may forget the meeting, the chore, the rush, but awe remembers the breath between, the quiet, the heartbeat slowed. And this is the secret whispered by the small things. Time, for all its seeming power, is not as fixed as it appears. It responds to presence. It stretches in reverence. It bends in beauty. It softens under wonder. What is small is not insignificant. What is quiet is not empty. And what is seen in awe is never forgotten. Purpose may not be a destination, but a rhythm that lives inside unnoticed moments. The search often begins with questions carved from longing. What is the reason for all this? Where is the meaning? What is the purpose? These questions echo through hearts and journals, through quiet mornings and sleepless nights. There is a belief that purpose stands somewhere far ahead, like a lighthouse blinking across a stormy sea, waiting to be reached. And yet, the further the search extends outward, the more elusive the answer seems to become. But what if purpose does not wait at the end of a path? What if it does not wear a crown, or stand on a stage, or arrive only when the last chapter is complete? What if it hums quietly in the background, hidden in plain sight, pulsing like a rhythm woven into the fabric of ordinary time? Purpose does not always arrive as a revelation. Sometimes it speaks as a whisper, a choice made with kindness, a task done with care, a pause taken instead of a reaction given. These small, unnoticed moments are where purpose often lives, not as a reward, but as a presence, not as an endpoint, but as a thread. Consider the moments no one praises, the hands that wash the dishes, the feet that keep walking despite exhaustion, the voice that comforts without needing to solve. These acts may pass uncelebrated, yet they carry something deeply essential. Purpose does not demand to be seen. It exists to be lived. There is a rhythm to it, a quiet beat that accompanies every step taken with integrity, every decision aligned with something deeper than survival. It doesn't shout, it doesn't shine, but it endures. It grows not in the grand, but in the consistent, not in arrival, but in presence. And perhaps purpose is not a thing to be found, but a way of being, a way of listening when others talk, a way of doing work with love, even when tired, a way of creating space for joy, even in grief. This rhythm pulses through the unnoticed, the way a child hums while drawing, or the way the wind lifts a corner of a page just as the reader reaches it. The world teaches to look up and out, to seek titles, achievements, and visible milestones. But some of the most fulfilled lives are filled not with trophies, but with quiet days strung together by devotion. The garden tended, the soup stirred, the story read aloud again and again. These acts may seem small, but they carry weight. Purpose gathers in the folds. And even when lost or uncertain, the rhythm is not gone. It only quiets. It waits, like a melody half remembered, like a heartbeat heard through walls. In returning to the simple, the rhythm returns too. It reveals itself not with fanfare, but with resonance, a sense of rightness, a click, a breath that feels just slightly fuller. Purpose may never introduce itself directly. It may never offer a clear definition, but it will always leave a trace, a calm in the chest, a lightness in the step, a knowing, wordless, and real. It lives not in the future, but in the unnoticed now. The desire for something deeper signals that something deeper exists. Longing does not arise from emptiness. It does not appear out of nowhere, like an echo without a sound to start it. Longing is the signpost of something real, just beyond reach, just beneath the surface, like a light glowing from behind a curtain. The heart does not ache for things that are impossible. It aches for things that are hidden, or waiting, or forgotten. Things that exist in some form, whether as truth, memory, or calling. There is a yearning that pulses beneath the noise of everyday life. It doesn't shout. It doesn't always even speak in words. It lingers like a question that has no shape, but presses inward all the same. A desire for more. Not more in volume, not more in possession, but more in depth. Something quieter, but truer. Something unshakable. Something whole. This desire does not arise from boredom or dissatisfaction. It comes from recognition. The soul recognizes what it cannot see. The way a plant leans toward light, even when the sun is hidden behind clouds. The way a river curves toward the sea, without needing to know why. That pull toward depth, toward meaning, toward something that transcends the shallow repetition of tasks and days. That is not illusion. It is orientation. Even when surrounded by distraction, there is a voice inside that cannot be muted. A voice that knows something deeper exists, not because it has been touched, but because the absence of it feels too loud. Like the space left behind after a song ends. Like the pause between breaths that holds the echo of life itself. This desire often hides in simple moments. The eyes resting on a sky and wondering if something watches back. The quiet ache after beauty appears unexpectedly. A painting, a face, a phrase, and leaves behind the haunting feeling of having touched something sacred. The stillness after laughter, when silence wraps around the soul and leaves a strange sweetness behind. All of these are hints, reminders. There is more. Not more to do, more to be. Not more to acquire, more to realize. A depth that cannot be manufactured, but only discovered by shedding layers of noise, of defense, of fear. This deeper thing is not far away. It is close. closer than the next breath. But closeness is not always clarity. It waits patiently, beneath the surface, whispering through longing. And the longing itself is holy. It does not need to be resolved immediately. It does not need to be quieted. It only asks to be honored. For the very act of longing reveals something eternal, that the heart knows its home, even if the feet have not yet arrived. What is deeper is not hidden as punishment. It is hidden as invitation. The surface is easy. The depths ask for surrender, not to darkness, but to meaning, to softness, to truth. And that truth waits, always. Stillness often holds more wisdom than noise ever could. Noise comes quickly. It arrives with answers, opinions, urgency. It rushes to fill every space, conversation, silence, thought. It creates the illusion of certainty, wrapping itself around facts and instructions like a flag waving in a storm. But beneath all the shouting, something gentler waits. Not competing, not arguing, just waiting. Stillness does not perform. It does not chase attention. It does not interrupt. Stillness exists the way a mountain exists, immovable, unconcerned with approval, ancient in its patience. In its silence, it invites, not to solve, but to see, not to declare, but to understand. Wisdom is often mistaken for volume, but volume only makes something louder, not truer. Wisdom needs space. It needs breath. It needs stillness, because stillness holds what noise cannot. The nuance, the question behind the question, the truth too fragile to be spoken over. Inside stillness, things settle. The thoughts that once raced begin to walk. The worries that screamed begin to whisper. And from that quiet, a new kind of hearing begins. A hearing that comes not from ears, but from awareness, from presence, from something deeper than intellect. Stillness does not provide answers the way noise does. It offers something subtler, insight, a flicker of understanding that cannot be traced back to a source, a knowing that rises like mist over a lake, not sharp, but complete. And often, that insight is not new, but remembered, the kind of truth already known, but forgotten in the rush of sound. There are places in the world where stillness is thick enough to feel. Forests at dawn, deserts under moonlight, rooms where grief has just passed, chapels where breath slows without trying. In these places, stillness is not absence. It is presence intensified. It is everything that matters, standing quietly, waiting to be noticed. Stillness teaches by not teaching. It reveals without revealing. It shows the soul how to return to itself, not by adding more, but by peeling away. The noise of the world says, be more, do more, say more. Stillness says, be here. And what unfolds in that here is nothing short of miracle. A mind once tangled finds its shape again. A heart once guarded softens. The breath deepens. The eyes stop scanning for threat and begin to witness beauty. Not dramatic beauty, subtle beauty. The kind that lives in shadows, in softness, in slowness. Stillness is not just a pause in activity. It is a state of reverence, a decision to listen to what has no voice, to hear what the world does not say aloud. It is in stillness that the first spark of healing begins. Not because something is fixed, but because something is finally allowed to be seen. Noise distracts. Stillness reveals. And what it reveals is not always easy. In stillness, truth often rises. The emotions pushed down begin to surface. The questions ignored begin to form sentences. But this is not punishment. It is permission. Stillness is the space where the soul comes forward, not to accuse, but to speak. Gently, honestly. Some of the wisest people speak the least, not because there is nothing to say, but because they have learned that stillness says more. Their presence carries weight. Their silence speaks volumes. The spaces between their words are not empty. They are charged with intention. Stillness holds wisdom, not because it knows everything, but because it knows enough to listen. It trusts that what matters will rise. It trusts that truth needs no decoration. And in that trust, it becomes a sanctuary. And the world, for all its noise, still bends toward this kind of wisdom. Somewhere, beneath the traffic and headlines and endless commentary, stillness waits, like a calm lake beneath a stormy sky, like a breath held in sacred pause. It does not beg to be heard. It only waits to be entered. And when it is, the noise no longer dominates. The wisdom returns. And with it, the understanding that silence is not emptiness. It is fullness, resting in quiet. Unmet strangers may one day become the most unforgettable stories. Somewhere, across time not yet lived and places not yet walked, a stranger is waiting. Not knowingly, not standing still, but living. A life that may one day brush against another, changing everything. A passerby, a coincidence, a face glimpsed in a moment that was never expected, but always meant to arrive. The world is full of people unknown, but not necessarily distant. Every great story once began with a stranger. Every lifelong friend, every soulmate, every lesson that lingered. At some point, all were unknown. Just shadows in a crowd, just names never spoken, just lives unfolding silently in parallel. Then, one day, two paths crossed. A word was exchanged, a gesture, a look, and the story began. Strangers carry entire universes within them, hopes shaped by unseen experiences, heartaches hidden behind everyday smiles, memories that stretch beyond what can ever be known. Each one walks with invisible books inside, pages filled with laughter, failure, kindness, silence, dreams not yet spoken. When two of these walking stories collide, something ancient and beautiful can emerge. Not always easily, but always honestly. Some connections arrive like lightning, unexpected and electric. Others unfold like seasons, slow and shifting, barely noticeable until the change is complete. And not all will stay. Some strangers arrive only for a chapter, a lesson, a moment that alters direction. But even the briefest encounters can leave fingerprints on the soul, pressed so gently they aren't felt until much later. A stranger may be the one who holds the door on a day when hope was fading. A stranger may share a truth in passing that becomes an anchor for years to come. A stranger may sit beside the same grief, unknowingly offering comfort just by existing in quiet solidarity. These are not small things. These are seeds. And some strangers will become unforgettable, not because of what they give, but because of what they reveal. Mirrors in human form, reflecting fears, dreams, or versions of self long buried. A single conversation may pull something to the surface that years of solitude never could. The soul recognizes before the mind understands. There is magic in the unknown. Potential wrapped in unpredictability. Somewhere, a stranger is learning the exact lesson needed to someday speak a sentence that shifts everything. Somewhere, a stranger is discovering a passion that will one day become part of a shared life. And somewhere, two lives that feel entirely separate are being quietly woven together by the invisible thread of time's great weaving. And perhaps the strangest truth of all is that those who will become unforgettable are also looking up at the same moon, breathing the same air, wondering the same questions, living their stories until they are ready to meet. And when they do, the world will never look the same again. Unmet does not mean unconnected. The future holds countless introductions, and some of those strangers will carry stories that change everything. Forgiveness begins where blame becomes too heavy to carry. Blame is not weightless. It clings, it presses. It builds over time, like dust on glass, so slowly that it becomes invisible until everything looks dim. It can feel like power at first, like control. a way to hold the narrative together, to point toward pain and say, "This is why." But over time, blame hardens. It turns soft sorrow into sharp edges. It turns memories into prisons. There comes a point when carrying blame, either toward another or toward oneself, becomes too heavy. Not because the reasons disappear, not because the harm was imagined, but because the soul begins to sag under the burden of always holding the past. Muscles meant for healing are strained by the constant act of gripping, and eventually, something inside begins to whisper, "There must be another way." Forgiveness does not begin with understanding. It begins with exhaustion, a deep, aching tiredness from the weight of carrying what cannot be changed. It is not a moment of denial. It is a moment of release, not for the one who caused harm, but for the one who has held the echo for too long. There is a difference between justice and vengeance, between memory and resentment. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not excusing. It is not erasing. It is choosing not to bleed every time the thought returns. It is choosing to live forward, even if the past still sings its songs. Sometimes the hardest forgiveness is not for others. It is for the self. The mistakes made, the words spoken in fear, the moments lost, the chances not taken. Self-blame can hide in silence, in hesitation, in the stories told only behind the eyes. And yet, even this can soften. Even this can be met with compassion. Forgiveness is not a declaration. It is a process, a series of quiet moments where anger begins to loosen, where tears fall without armor, where the need to be right becomes less important than the need to be free. It is not always graceful. Sometimes it is messy, trembling, uncertain. But it moves. It breathes. To forgive is to set down the stone, not because it wasn't heavy, but because the journey ahead requires open hands. The hands that hold blame cannot hold peace. The heart that clings to bitterness cannot make space for healing. And the mind that replays the past cannot fully live in the present. Forgiveness does not always mean reconnection. Some doors remain closed. Some people remain distant. But forgiveness is not for them. It is for the soul that longs to stop fighting what cannot be undone. It is for the spirit that has grown tired of carrying every shard. And in the quiet that follows forgiveness, something unexpected happens. Space returns. Breath deepens. The past becomes quieter. The future becomes possible again. The self, once fractured by blame, begins to knit itself back together. Forgiveness begins not in triumph, but in surrender. It begins when blame becomes too heavy, and the heart chooses to let go, not because it has to, but because it is finally ready. Scars form where the body chose to heal, not where it gave up. A scar is not a failure. It is not the mark of defeat, nor a symbol of weakness. It is the echo of healing, the visible signature left behind by a battle that has already been survived. Scars do not appear in places where the body gave up. They appear where the body fought to close a wound, where life stitched itself back together through the slow, sacred act of regeneration. Underneath every scar, something broke. Skin split, flesh tore, bone cracked, pain entered. But the presence of a scar proves that something else arrived too. Response. Not a restoration of what once was, but the creation of something new. Not flawless, but whole. There is grace in what scars carry. They hold memory, but not in the way that pain does. Pain lives sharp and raw. Scars live quietly. They speak in texture, in silence, in the way light changes slightly across the skin. They do not beg for attention. They simply exist, reminders not of the damage, but of the resilience that followed. Some scars are easy to see. Others are hidden beneath clothes, beneath silence, beneath decades. Some live in the body. Others live in the heart, in the mind, in the soul. the shape of a loss, the imprint of betrayal, the lingering ache of abandonment. These too leave their mark. These too are wounds that once bled, and then, in time, healed. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not quickly, but healed all the same. Healing is not an erasure. It does not return the world to how it was before. It accepts what happened and builds something from the remains. The scar is that building. It is the architecture of survival. It tells the quiet story of everything endured and everything overcome. And though the world often worships smoothness, flawlessness, the untouched, there is deeper beauty in the flawed. In the place where the body or the heart said, "I will not let this break be the end." That is what a scar says. Something happened here, and something continued here. Some scars remain tender. Some lose all feeling. Some are avoided in mirrors. Some are touched with pride. There is no correct way to carry them. Each is its own language. Each is its own testament. A scar does not lie. It does not exaggerate. It tells exactly what it must, and no more. And in its quiet honesty, it becomes sacred. It offers proof that healing does not mean erasing, and survival does not mean returning to what was before. Survival means moving forward, marked, but still walking. The ones who bear the deepest scars often carry the most quiet strength. Not because pain has made them invincible, but because healing has made them wise. They know how to hurt and keep living. They know how to break and still rebuild. They know how to carry memory without becoming it. In a world obsessed with perfection, scars are truth. And truth, even when born of pain, has beauty. Not a loud, shining beauty, but the kind that lingers, the kind that deepens with time. Scars form where life chose to continue. And there is no greater triumph than that. Truth needs no applause to remain true. Truth does not wait for clapping hands or nodding heads. It does not swell in volume when it is praised, nor shrink when it is ignored. It is not dependent on belief or attention or recognition. It simply is, unchanging, unmoved, timeless. There is a quiet dignity in truth. It does not beg to be heard. It does not force its way into rooms. It waits. It stands. It remains. Even when buried beneath layers of distraction, opinion, and noise, truth does not vanish. It rests beneath, steady as stone beneath shifting sand. The world often measures value in visibility, that which is seen, celebrated, shared, the bright, the loud, the popular. But truth does not operate on popularity. It does not ask to be chosen in order to be real. Its reality is self-contained, independent of acceptance. In moments of silence, truth often arrives, not with fanfare, but with clarity. A sudden alignment, a deep breath, a knowing without knowing how. It may not come when asked. It may not answer the question being spoken aloud. But it comes. And when it does, its presence is unmistakable. Truth does not argue. It does not plead. It does not wear a costume. It simply exists in its purest form, often gentle, often inconvenient, sometimes shattering. It does not twist itself to soothe. It does not adapt itself to comfort. But it always points toward alignment. And even when denied, it persists. Hidden under falsehoods, it glows like embers, waiting. And when the noise falls away, when the lies collapse under their own weight, truth emerges without rust, without dust, as if it had never left. There is power in quiet truth, in the kind that does not seek validation, in the kind that holds its form, regardless of who acknowledges it. This kind of truth cannot be bought, sold, or shaped. It is eternal, and it demands reverence, not applause. Often, truth is misunderstood. It disrupts the easy story. It complicates the comfortable version. It reveals what has been avoided. And in doing so, it invites growth. Not surface growth, but deep transformation. The kind that begins with humility. Truth does not flatter. It does not entertain. It does not dress itself to be liked. And yet, those who walk with it find themselves walking lighter. Not because the path is easier, but because it is real. There is peace in alignment. Not always comfort, but peace. Applause fades. Trends shift. Opinions evolve. But truth does not change to fit the hour. It holds itself through the centuries, through cultures, through languages. What was true 1,000 years ago about love, about loss, about the nature of kindness or cruelty, remains true, even now. To speak truth is not always to win favor. Often, it is to stand alone. But even in solitude, truth does not abandon. It walks quietly beside the one who honors it, a silent companion with a gaze that never turns away. Truth does not need to be loud. Its presence speaks louder than volume ever could. It does not need to be rewarded. It only needs to be lived. Every breath defies the weight of the unknown. In a world made of questions, breath is the one act that never waits for answers. It rises, falls, repeats, regardless of clarity, certainty, or control. In the dark, in the fog, in the fragile space between fear and surrender, breath continues. It does not ask for proof. It does not pause for permission. It moves through the unknown with a quiet defiance that speaks not in declarations, but in rhythm. The unknown is everywhere. It sits inside every tomorrow, curls into the edge of every choice, hovers above each silence. The future cannot be held. The past cannot be re-entered. And the present often arrives carrying questions still warm from the fire of wonder. What will happen? What has been missed? What is waiting beyond what can be seen? And still, breath comes. The lungs do not ask what's next. The heart does not wait to be reassured. The body, ancient and instinctive, chooses life over and over again, not in the absence of uncertainty, but in its presence. Each inhale is a decision, not always conscious, not always celebratory, but always defiant. There is power in this simplicity. The breath is the bridge. It crosses the gap between chaos and calm. It is the reminder that life is still happening, even when the mind feels frozen in hesitation. It whispers, "This is enough for now." Not in denial of the unknown, but in coexistence with it. Breath grounds the abstract. While thoughts spin and shift, while fears swell and dissolve, the breath holds steady, not to fix or explain, but to anchor. Even in the face of mystery, even when the next step is unseen, breath is already stepping forward, softly, invisibly, faithfully. There is no need to conquer the unknown. It cannot be tamed, but it can be moved through, not by force, but by rhythm, breath by breath. The world may never offer full clarity, but the breath offers continuity. A way to move without understanding. A way to live without certainty. This is not weakness. This is not giving in. This is the strongest kind of courage. The kind that chooses to exist within the question rather than waiting for the answer to begin living. And perhaps that is where strength is found. Not in controlling what cannot be known, but in choosing to continue anyway. Not in fearlessness, but in movement through fear. Not in the absence of doubt, but in the quiet inhale that comes after it. Every breath is a small miracle, a silent celebration, a declaration that despite the unknown, despite the weight of what cannot be seen, something within chooses to remain, to stay, to breathe. And that choice, made 1,000 times a day without words, is proof that life knows how to carry itself forward, even in the dark. A younger version of this moment still lives somewhere in the folds of time. Time folds in strange ways. It does not move forward in a straight line. It curls, bends, spirals. Moments echo through one another, sometimes forgotten, sometimes felt again in fragments. A scent, a sound, a pause. Somewhere, in the deep structure of time, the past is still breathing. And within that breath, this moment, once dreamed of, is still unfolding in miniature, untouched by endings. There is a younger version of this moment, one where the questions had not yet been asked, where the weight of experience had not yet settled into the shoulders. A version filled with unspoken hope, quiet wonder, wide-eyed stillness. Not because it was naive, but because it had not yet been shaped by what followed. That younger version is not gone. It is not lost in dust or buried in forgotten memory. It is layered beneath the present like pages in a book, like roots beneath earth. The laughter that once rose without hesitation, the wonder that once appeared at the simplest things, the raw openness that had no armor, these still exist. Not in the same form, but in echoes. Every present moment carries within it every version that came before, like a tree that still holds its rings. The older the tree, the more rings. The older the soul, the more layers. Each layer a story, each story a part of the whole. No part discarded, no part irrelevant. The younger version lives in the small things, in the way a certain song stirs something without explanation, in the way a face softens when light hits it just right, in the sudden desire to run without purpose, to laugh loudly, to be still for no reason at all. Even now, when the world has changed, when days are shaped by rhythm and responsibility, the child self still watches. The dreamer still dreams beneath the surface. That younger version never left. It simply stepped back, allowing the now to unfold. And sometimes, without warning, the past returns. Not as memory, but as presence. A moment so familiar it feels like it has already happened. A scent so specific it brings back an entire season. A pause so deep it opens a door to a forgotten part of the soul. Time folds again, and for a heartbeat, the younger and older selves breathe in the same rhythm. There is beauty in knowing that no moment is ever truly alone. The now is surrounded by layers of then, some filled with light, some filled with shadow, but all of them part of the same fabric, the same life, the same thread stretching across time. And within that thread, there is continuity, a dialogue between who once was and who now stands in the moment. Not a conversation in words, but in feeling, in movement, in being. The child once dreamed of this moment. The dream may not match the shape of what now exists, but the fact that this moment is real means that something imagined once found its way into the world. A seed planted in the past has become a tree now offering shade. And the one who dreamed that younger version into being is still dreaming now. Not toward the past, but toward the future, toward moments not yet lived, futures not yet formed. Someone else, somewhere further along the thread of time, will one day look back to this moment as part of their foundation. A younger version lives within, not to be returned to, but to be remembered, honored, integrated, not as a lost innocence, but as a still beating heart, a compass, a spark. Time folds, and in those folds, every version remains. Life may be a vast orchestra, each meeting a note in a song too large to hear at once. There is music moving through the unseen, always playing, not through instruments held in hand, but through moments held in time. Every encounter, brief or long, joyful or painful, is a note in a melody too immense to recognize in its entirety. The rhythm can't always be heard. The harmony doesn't always sound right in the moment. But it plays on, shaping the architecture of existence with a precision too wide to measure. Imagine an orchestra with no conductor in sight, yet each instrument enters at exactly the right moment. A laugh shared with a stranger on a train, A conversation that circles back years later with unexpected meaning. A missed connection that led to a more meaningful one. Every meeting, every crossing, every silence, each is a note. Some short, some lingering, some discordant, only to reveal their beauty in retrospect when the full chord reveals itself. Not every note is soft. Not every measure is peaceful. Some are heavy, filled with grief. Others erupt like brass in battle, clashing without resolution. But none are wasted. In the grand score, even dissonance serves the melody. It adds tension so that peace, when it returns, is felt more deeply. It creates contrast, texture, depth. And most of the time, the music cannot be heard while it is being lived. Ears are tuned to the immediacy of sound, the present moment, the noise of the now. Only in looking back, or in pausing long enough to listen beneath the surface, can the patterns begin to emerge. A kindness given years ago returning in unexpected form. A seemingly random encounter shaping an entire decade. A goodbye that became the beginning of something more whole. The orchestra is vast. Every life contributes its own melody. Every interaction becomes a duet, a trio, a symphonic bridge between past and future. And even those who seem to have walked away forever are still part of the score. Echoes, reverberations, motifs that reappear when least expected. No one hears the whole song at once. Not in this lifetime. The score is too large, the structure too intricate. But sometimes, for a moment, everything aligns. A quiet night, a familiar breeze, a voice that feels like home. In that moment, a chord resolves. And for a heartbeat, the music is not just heard. It is felt. It fills the lungs. It brings tears. It leaves something behind. Those moments are not accidents. They are movements. The culmination of countless notes played over time, converging into harmony. They remind that life is not random. It is composed, not always by design that can be understood, but by a weaving that never drops a thread. And when silence comes, when the measure ends, and the next has not yet begun, it is not absence. It is rest. A pause written into the score. The stillness between phrases that gives meaning to sound. Even silence is part of the music. No one note defines the song. No single meeting carries the full meaning. It is in the accumulation that the beauty is found. In the layers. In the way one note changes the ones around it. The melody is too large to hear all at once. But it is real. It is there. And it is still playing. Some paths only appear under the moonlight. Not every road is made for daylight. Some remain invisible until the sun steps away, and the sky turns silver with quiet. These paths do not shout for attention. They do not glitter with certainty. They wait for night, when the eyes soften, when the world grows still, when the shadows no longer feel like enemies, but invitations. Moonlight reveals differently than sunlight. It does not burn. It does not blind. It paints everything in quiet gradients. It makes the ordinary mysterious again. Under its glow, the edges of things blur, and what once seemed solid begins to shimmer with meaning. A forest becomes a cathedral. A gravel road becomes a dream. A river reflects not just water, but memory. There are decisions that cannot be made in noise. Questions that cannot be answered in the glare of clarity. Some truths are too soft to survive the brightness. They need darkness to grow. Not darkness as in despair, but darkness as in depth, as in inwardness, as in stillness. And some directions only become visible when all other lights have dimmed, when the usual voices go silent, when the distractions fall away. That is when the hidden paths begin to emerge. Not ahead, but beneath. Beneath the expectations. Beneath the assumptions. Beneath the surface of everyday movement. These are not paved roads. They often begin where the known ends. They wind through places uncharted, through memory, through longing, through mystery. But they are real, and they are ancient. They were always there, waiting. The moon does not speak in declarations. It speaks in feeling, in the pull of tides, in the way wolves sing to it without needing words, in the way it draws ocean and blood alike. It is a guide not of maps, but of rhythm, a teacher not of facts, but of presence. The paths revealed in Moonlight require trust, not because they are unsafe, but because they do not promise understanding. They do not offer full visibility, only enough light for the next step, only enough silence to hear the breath, only enough softness to walk with bare feet. And it is on these paths that the deepest changes occur, in the places no one else sees, in the journeys taken without fanfare, a shift in perspective, a decision made under starlight, a vow spoken only to the trees. These moments carve something permanent. They do not shine in public, but they hold everything. When dawn returns, the path may disappear again, covered in the noise of day, the pull of tasks, the glare of logic. But what was seen cannot be unseen. What was felt in the stillness becomes a compass, even when invisible. The moonlight lingers in the bones. The direction, once discovered, stays etched into the soul. Some paths are not made for everyone. They do not exist on maps. They cannot be followed by footsteps alone. They require a willingness to walk in mystery, to allow intuition to lead, to let the night be not an obstacle, but a companion. And in doing so, something ancient is remembered. That guidance is not always loud. That truth is not always bright. That direction sometimes is found not by seeking, but by waiting, listening, watching the moon rise, and stepping forward into silver darkness, where the most sacred roads quietly begin. There is a light that exists inside pain, though it rarely announces itself. Pain arrives uninvited. It knocks with force, sometimes with fire, sometimes with silence, sometimes with the slow erosion of what once felt whole. It can enter without warning, or build quietly, like a tide pulling the shore away, grain by grain. And when it comes, it takes up space. It speaks in the language of pressure, of ache, of unraveling. It brings attention inward, narrowing the world to the wound. But somewhere within that wound, deep in the marrow of what hurts, light waits. This is not a light that blinds. It does not flare. It does not shout through the darkness. It lives like a coal, hidden beneath ash. It survives in stillness, in breath, in the slow, reluctant softening of a heart that has closed itself against the cold. It does not arrive with the pain. It arrives after, or sometimes in the middle, barely perceptible, like a hum in the silence between sobs. Pain transforms, though it rarely feels like growth in the moment. It strips away illusions. It burns through false promises and exposes what cannot be faked. It teaches the difference between distraction and depth, between avoidance and truth. Pain asks questions that comfort never dared to speak. What matters? What remains when nothing else does? What is worth carrying through fire? And through that questioning, a light begins to stir. It is the light that comes when control is no longer possible, but presence becomes necessary. The light that flickers in the space where expectations die, and something more honest takes their place. The light of self-compassion rising through the ruins of judgment. The light of simplicity, of realizing that even in sorrow, a breath can still arrive. A hand can still open. A sunrise can still be seen. Pain does not come to destroy, though destruction may happen along the way. It comes to hollow out what can no longer hold truth. It comes to prepare space, and in that space, light eventually grows, not in defiance of pain, but because of it. This light does not promise answers. It does not always bring relief, but it brings clarity, a softness, a resilience not built on armor, but on surrender. It brings an intimacy with life that cannot be taught by peace alone. There are those who have walked through fires and now glow quietly, like lanterns in the dusk. They do not speak often of the pain itself, but it lives in the way they pause, the way they notice, the way they sit beside others without needing to fix or flee. The light inside pain shaped them, not instantly, not easily, but fully. This is the paradox. Pain, when met with openness, becomes a gate. And beyond that gate is not a promise of unbroken joy, but a deeper kind of living. One where even sorrow has meaning. One where even the scar holds beauty. Light lives inside pain, hidden, silent, waiting. Not to end the pain, but to illuminate the path through it. Becoming often requires unlearning. The path to becoming is not always built upward. It is often carved inward, through layers of belief, story, identity. Not all growth is accumulation. Sometimes it is subtraction, the shedding of what never truly belonged, the unraveling of patterns mistaken for personality, the release of expectations worn like armor, heavy and ill-fitting. From childhood onward, the world teaches, through repetition, through reward, through silence. It teaches what is considered valuable, acceptable, admirable. It teaches how to be seen, how to be praised, how to belong. But in this learning, something else often slips away. The rawness, the instinct, the wild truth of the soul before it was trimmed to fit. And so, to become, to truly become, is often to return. Not backward, but deeper. To remember what was known before the forgetting. To unlearn the noise in order to hear the voice beneath. This is not a rebellion. It is a remembering. Unlearning is not easy. It asks for discomfort. It invites doubt. It often begins with the realization that something no longer fits, even if it once did. A role, a belief, a way of being. The shift does not come as a sudden blaze, but as a quiet discomfort, like a shoe too tight, or a song no longer resonating. And then comes the letting go. Letting go of certainty, of needing to be right, of performing instead of living, of chasing instead of listening, of the idea that becoming is about more, when often it is about less. Less pretending, less proving, less pleasing. Unlearning creates space, and in that space, truth begins to grow. A truth that was always there, waiting under layers of repetition and should. A truth that moves not in lines, but in spirals. That speaks not in commands, but in questions. That feels not like ambition, but like alignment. Becoming is not a destination. It is a movement, a rhythm, a pulse. And that rhythm cannot be danced to when the music is too loud with inherited noise. To find it, silence is needed, stillness, a willingness to set down what no longer sings. This is not forgetting the past. It is honoring it enough to grow beyond it. It is not rejecting what was learned. It is discerning what still belongs. Some lessons remain, others fade. Some identities evolve, others dissolve. The self that arrives through unlearning is not an invention. It is a recognition. And often, what is found is not something new, but something familiar. Like a voice once silenced, now softly singing again. Like a rhythm once lost, now returning with quiet confidence. To unlearn is to free. And in that freedom, the self begins not to build, but to emerge. Breath once belonged to stars, passed down through the language of atoms. Long before lungs learned how to rise and fall, long before ribs knew how to expand, the breath belonged elsewhere. It traveled through time not as air, but as matter. Drifting dust, ancient gas, the silent signature of collapsed stars. What now moves invisibly through the body once burned in stellar furnaces, was flung across galaxies, cooled in darkness, then stitched into flesh. This is not poetry. It is science, wrapped in mystery. Every inhalation is the return of something that has been circling the cosmos for billions of years. Carbon forged in the death throes of suns. Oxygen born in the hearts of exploding giants. Hydrogen, older than time, flowing through rivers, leaves, and lungs. To breathe is not just to live. It is to participate in an ancient inheritance. The stars gave their lives for this breath, not in sacrifice, but in design. They bloomed into brilliance, then broke apart, scattering elements like seeds. These seeds drifted, gathered, formed planets, oceans, bones. What was once light became weight. What was once fire became flesh. The same atoms now held in a single breath once danced in constellations. Breath, then, is not only function, it is memory, a silent language passed down from creation to creature. It carries stories no mind can fully hold, of nebulae and black holes, of silence vast enough to contain the birth of galaxies. Each molecule whispers, "I was there," not in voice, but in vibration, in the rhythm of inhaling and releasing. Breathing is not only survival, it is remembrance. The cosmos continues its song through the lungs. The rise and fall of breath mirrors the rise and fall of stars. Expansion, contraction, life, stillness. The universe pulses, and that pulse moves through every living thing. To breathe is to belong, not just to the world, but to everything that ever was. The atoms in a single breath have traveled farther than any mind can grasp. They have touched ancient trees, distant oceans, and hearts long stopped. They return, again and again, never gone, only borrowed. And in each breath, the stars live on, not in the sky, but in the chest. The echo of cosmic fire, now quiet, now personal, now sacred. Clocks measure hours, but not awakenings. Time is often framed in numbers, seconds, minutes, hours, sliced into neat boxes, stacked one after the other, like bricks building a wall between past and future. Clocks become the guardians of this structure, turning in perfect circles, counting forward with unblinking discipline. But while clocks can mark when something happens, they cannot say what has truly happened. They can track when the sun rises, but not when a soul finally does. Awakenings do not follow time's rules. They do not schedule themselves according to morning alarms or calendar days. They come unannounced, like birds breaking silence, like water suddenly remembering how to flow again. A person can live years inside a rhythm of perfect hours and never wake. And then, in a single, unnoticed moment, during a walk, a sentence, a breath, everything changes. The eyes see differently. The heart listens more closely. A shift occurs that no clock could predict. Clocks cannot measure this. They do not know how to recognize when the self unfolds from its shell, when numbness gives way to feeling, when stillness transforms from stagnation into peace, when the world, once flat, suddenly shimmers with meaning in the curve of a leaf or the sound of distant rain. An awakening is not a single event. It is a quiet revolution, a series of flickers that eventually catch fire. It may begin with discomfort, a question that refuses to be silenced, a longing too persistent to ignore. The hands of a clock may keep turning, unaware, while the soul begins to stir, stretch, unravel. Time can mark the hours spent asleep, but it cannot contain the depth of a single realization that rewrites everything. It cannot weigh the silence after a truth is spoken, or the stillness that follows forgiveness. It cannot hold the moment when resistance crumbles and softness returns like an old friend. These are awakenings, and they belong to another kind of time entirely. Some awakenings happen in the dark, in grief, in solitude, in loss. Others arrive in the midst of joy, unbidden, in laughter, in music, in the beauty of something completely ordinary. The spark does not ask for permission. It simply ignites. And once it does, nothing feels the same. The clock still ticks, but the moments within it begin to expand. A single second may feel eternal. A minute may hold more truth than years did before. Time no longer rules. It dances. It bends. It slows. It breathes. Clocks keep time, but only presence keeps meaning. The deepest awakenings happen beneath the hands of the clock, where numbers cannot reach. They live in the soul's memory, not in a schedule. They are remembered not by date, but by feeling. By the way the world looked after. By the way light entered a room differently. By the way the self returned to itself, not suddenly, but fully. Awakenings cannot be predicted, but they wait patiently in the background of every ordinary day, in every conversation, every silence, every breath. Clocks will continue to tick, but real time is kept in the heart. The loudest truth often comes disguised as quiet. Truth does not always arrive with a voice raised or a banner held high. It rarely announces itself with thunder or fire. More often, it enters gently, on the heels of silence, in the hush between sentences, in the still moment after a long exhale. It lives in the pause, not the performance, in the felt, not always the spoken, in the knowing that settles deeper than language can go. There is a kind of truth that does not argue, does not convince, does not seek validation. It simply is. It doesn't move with noise, because noise is unnecessary for what is undeniable. This truth doesn't need the spotlight. It prefers to sit quietly at the edge of awareness, waiting for the noise to fall away so that its shape can finally be seen. Often, it reveals itself when everything else has fallen silent, when the mind has grown tired of spinning, when the heart has stopped resisting, when the room grows still enough to hear the body speak in the only way it knows how, through sensation, through rhythm, through instinct. In those moments, what once seemed unclear becomes softly undeniable. Some truths do not want to be shouted. They do not belong in debate or drama. They belong in the gentle way eyes close when they find peace, in the way a hand is extended without hesitation, in the way something deep inside says yes, not loudly, but completely. The world tends to reward the loudest voice in the room, the one that fills the silence first. But volume does not equal clarity. Noise does not equal wisdom. What is loud may grab attention, but it rarely holds presence. True understanding comes when the noise fades, when the soul no longer needs to defend, to react, to prove, when there is only stillness left. And in that stillness, something real can finally speak. Some call it intuition. Some call it gut feeling. Others call it knowing. But it has no need for names. It simply arrives, like a memory remembered at just the right time, like a door that was always there, waiting to be noticed. It does not knock. It simply opens. This quiet truth is often missed, not because it is hidden, but because it is drowned out, by distractions, by expectations, by the hum of urgency and the roar of opinion. But even when ignored, it remains. It does not retreat in anger. It waits, patient, eternal. And when it finally comes through, it does not feel like a surprise. It feels like a homecoming. The loudest truth may never be spoken aloud, but once felt, it never leaves. Dreams may be messages from lives once lived, or yet to come. The mind sleeps, but something else awakens. Behind closed eyes, entire worlds are born. Without boundary, without rule, faces appear that the waking self has never seen, yet feel impossibly familiar. Places unfold that hold the scent of memory, though they exist in no map. Events happen that defy logic, yet leave behind a residue of truth. Dreams do not follow the rules of the body. They follow the rhythm of the soul. And perhaps the reason dreams feel so real is because they are. Not in the measurable way waking life is, but in the way a memory feels real. In the way a moment of déjà vu stirs a kind of ancient recognition, as if the dream is not invention, but remembrance, a message from something older, or perhaps something still waiting to happen. What if dreams are not just fragments of imagination, but messages passed between lives? Threads woven from other timelines, other versions of self walking different roads. A life lived centuries ago, its essence echoing forward. Or a life not yet begun, reaching backward through time to send a whisper, a glimpse, a pull. A person dreams of being someone else, wearing different clothes, speaking a forgotten language, walking unfamiliar streets with the confidence of familiarity. It doesn't feel new. It feels returned. Not fiction, memory, not invention, continuation. Some dreams come wrapped in metaphor, a fire that will not go out, a staircase that cannot be climbed, a child holding a key with no door in sight. These are not puzzles to be solved, but messages to be absorbed. Clues from deeper places. The soul speaks in symbol, and dreams are its native tongue. And sometimes, a dream feels like prophecy, not in the way of prediction, but in the way of preparation. A glimpse into a possibility not yet lived. A meeting with someone not yet known. A moment that, when it finally arrives, feels like stepping into something already seen. This is the mystery of dreams. They do not follow the path of time. They are not linear. They are not bound to the identity carried in the daylight. They stretch beyond form. They remind the self that it is more than name, more than story, more than memory. Dreams break the mirror of the present and reveal the infinite beneath it. Perhaps the self in dreams is not a fantasy, but a sibling self, living in a parallel layer of reality. Or perhaps dreams are echoes, bouncing across the chambers of existence, arriving through sleep because waking life is too loud to hear them. Not every dream is deep. Some are static, some are noise, but some leave behind a taste that lingers, a color that doesn't exist in waking memory, a feeling that sits in the chest all day without name. These are not accidents. They are messages. They are portals. In dreams, fear and longing collide without filter. Love is remembered without condition. The dead return, not as memories, but as presences. The body sleeps, but the soul does not. It travels. It listens. It learns. And perhaps the veil between lives is thinner than imagined. Perhaps the soul weaves its lives like a loom. This one, that one, the next. And in dreams, it speaks from all of them at once. So when a dream stays, when it refuses to fade with the sun, it may be worth listening. Not for interpretation, but for essence. Not for prediction, but for invitation. A message may have arrived. Not from this life, but from another. Not from the past or the future, but from the self that exists beyond both. Autumn teaches the art of letting go without bitterness. There is a moment, just before the wind carries the first leaf away, when the world pauses. The green has already begun to fade, turning toward fire, amber, rust, gold. Trees do not resist this change. They do not mourn the coming loss. Instead, they prepare. Quietly, beautifully, with a kind of grace that does not beg for spring to stay. Autumn does not arrive with force. It enters with softness, with cool air that smells of earth, with light that turns golden before evening, with the gentle creak of branches accepting their next form. This is not a season of death. It is a season of release. The trees do not see the falling leaves as loss. They see it as continuation, as preparation, as trust in what comes next. And in this, they teach something ancient. Letting go does not have to be violent. It does not require bitterness, or blame, or the illusion of control. It can be gentle, It can be slow. It can even be beautiful. The leaves do not cling. They do not resent the wind. When their time comes, they float, softly, silently, to the earth below. Each one a final breath, a whispered farewell. They do not scream as they fall. They dance, twisting, spiraling, surrendering. Letting go is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that holding on too long can become a kind of harm. That there is a rhythm to life, and fighting that rhythm only brings unrest. Trees let go, not because they are tired, but because it is time. And in their letting go, they make space. For stillness, for rest, for what will rise again. The ground becomes a mosaic, a carpet of memory. No leaf falls in vain. Each one feeds the soil, covers the roots, shelters the seeds of spring not yet visible. What was shed becomes the foundation for what will grow. Nothing is wasted. Even the release becomes nourishment. Bitterness has no place in this process. The tree does not curse the frost. It does not beg for summer's return. It stands, bare and whole, trusting that what has fallen will become part of something new. It understands that surrender is not the end of growth, but part of it. And so, autumn moves slowly, teaching with color and wind, whispering truths not written in books, reminding that beauty can exist in goodbye, that peace can be found in the absence of what once was, that the art of release is not forgetting, but honoring. To let go like autumn is to trust the cycle, to believe that life continues beneath the surface, to understand that what once served may no longer be needed, and that is not tragedy, but transformation. The world does not mourn its leaves. It celebrates them, and then it lets them go. Healing does not require permission from perfection. Perfection stands like a statue in the mind, still, cold, untouchable. It promises safety. It promises approval. It says, only when everything is fixed, only when all is flawless, can the healing begin. But healing does not listen to that voice. It does not wait for the right time, the right mood, the right version of the self. It begins in the broken places. It rises from the cracks. Healing does not require clean hands or quiet thoughts. It arrives in the mess, in the tremble, in the days when nothing makes sense. It lives not in polished surfaces, but in soil, in rain, in silence. It does not wait for permission. It simply begins, slowly, invisibly, often unnoticed. There is a belief that healing must be earned, that it must follow understanding, that it must be deserved. But healing is not a reward. It is a response, a movement, a breath returned after long stillness. It does not ask if the wound should have happened. It does not require answers before it starts to sew. The mind wants order, wants to explain every bruise, every scar, every ache. But the body knows differently. The body knows how to begin again without needing to justify the fall. A cut begins to close before the cause is even named. A bruise begins to fade while the story is still being told. The body does not wait for perfection. It listens only to what needs mending. Healing is often clumsy. It is not linear. It loops, it stalls, it hides and reappears. It does not follow the clock. It does not obey plans. Some days are full of light. Others are shadows returned. Both are part of the process. Both are necessary. Perfection, in contrast, is rigid. It does not allow space for fluctuation, for failure, for softness. It demands silence from the wound. But wounds do not heal in silence. They heal in tenderness, in breath, in the permission to still hurt while beginning to mend. Healing begins in the smallest of ways, in a moment of rest, in a word spoken honestly, in the refusal to abandon the self again. It begins when the self is met, not as a project to be perfected, but as a being to be held. to be seen, to be allowed. And sometimes healing looks like nothing at all. It looks like walking, washing dishes, watching the wind. It is not always dramatic. It is not always visible, but it is always real. There are those who heal loudly, through voice, through movement, through art. And there are those who heal quietly, through stillness, through patience, through tears no one sees. Both are valid. Both are sacred. Perfection has never been a requirement. It is not the door to healing. Presence is. Compassion is. Slowness is. And in that space, healing continues. Not in spite of the mess, but because of it. Rest is not laziness, but a sacred kind of wisdom. There is a rhythm older than calendars, deeper than clocks. A rhythm that lives in the tides, in the sleeping bear, in the falling of leaves, in the pause between heartbeats. Rest is part of that rhythm. Not an interruption, not a weakness, but a necessary breath in the cycle of becoming. The world often forgets this. It spins loudly, endlessly, rewarding the constant motion, the unbroken productivity, the performance of achievement. There is praise for the grind, for the sacrifice, for the sleepless pursuit. And in that praise, rest becomes misunderstood. It is seen as pause when it is actually presence. It is mistaken for passivity when it is its own form of power. Rest is not the absence of value. It is what makes value sustainable. It is not retreat. It is return. A return to source, to self, to the quiet intelligence of the body and soul. Just as fields must lie fallow, just as soil must be left undisturbed to regain its richness, the mind and heart, too, require stillness to restore what motion has worn thin. The animals know this. The trees know this. The seasons know this. Only the human world insists on speeding past the sacred silence that renewal requires. But even in this forgetting, the body remembers. It sends signals: exhaustion, resistance, forgetfulness, ache. Not as punishments, but as invitations. To stop, to listen, to be. In rest, clarity returns. The thoughts untangle. The senses reawaken. The colors deepen. What once felt overwhelming softens. What once felt distant becomes intimate again. Rest makes room for integration, for the wisdom gained in movement to take root, to grow, to bloom in unseen places. There are knowings that cannot be reached through effort. There are truths that arrive only when the world is silent. Rest opens that door. It says, not everything must be earned through struggle. Some things arrive through softness, through slowness, through the kind of stillness that holds the breath of the sacred. Even the stars do not burn constantly. They flicker, they dim, they collapse, and are reborn. There is rhythm in the cosmos, not just light. There is pause. There is rest. The night sky itself is proof that beauty includes the dark, the quiet, the space between. Rest is a wisdom passed down through wind, through water, through the breath of forests. It speaks not in words, but in rhythms, in the pull of the tide, in the curl of the fern, in the silence of snowfall. It is a knowing that says, stop, sit, be still. Let the world meet you here. To rest is not to give up. It is to remember that life is not a finish line. It is a dance, and every dance includes stillness. Every breath includes pause. Every heart includes rest between beats. This is not laziness. It is devotion. And it is sacred. Perhaps this exact life was chosen by a soul seeking something extraordinary. Long before form, before name, before time itself had woven the fabric of seasons, there may have been a choice. Not made with words, but with awareness, with vision. A choice not to escape the unknown, but to enter it, to embody it, to live it from within. This life, its shape, its struggles, its quiet mornings and unspoken aches, may not be accidental. It may not be random. Perhaps it was chosen by a soul that knew something valuable could only be learned from this particular constellation of experience. Not chosen for ease, not chosen for certainty, but chosen for depth, for the exact blend of joy and sorrow, of challenge and grace that would draw out something ancient, something hidden, something extraordinary. The soul may have seen this life not as a test, but as a path, a sacred opportunity to remember, to grow, to transform, not through escape, but through immersion, through becoming fully human, fully feeling, fully alive. It may have chosen this time, this place, these people, knowing that each encounter would serve as a mirror, that every love would shape, that every loss would deepen, that the very limitations would reveal the most profound forms of freedom. Even the wounds may have been part of the plan, not as punishments, but as points of entry, places where light could later pour in, where resilience could be born, where empathy could be cultivated, where the ego would break just enough for truth to enter. Perhaps the soul did not fear suffering, not because it sought it, but because it saw beyond it. It saw what would emerge. It saw the kindness waiting on the other side of heartbreak, the clarity born from confusion, the strength grown in shadows. It trusted the process. And so it came, not as perfection, not as certainty, but as presence, as breath, as this particular life, with all its complications, with all its quiet wonders, with all its unspoken beauty. This life, then, is not a mistake. It is not a punishment. It is not something to escape. It is a journey chosen by a soul with a vision that cannot always be seen from within the storm, but one that holds steady behind every tear, every triumph, every ordinary miracle. There is meaning in the mundane, sacredness in the small, and all of it, the light, the struggle, the unfolding, is part of the design. Extraordinary does not always look like grandness. Sometimes it looks like persistence, like gentleness, like returning to the self again and again, even after forgetting, like choosing to love anyway, to trust anyway, to rise anyway. And maybe the soul, from wherever it first stood, saw this life not as broken, but as beautiful. Because it knew something extraordinary would be born here, not someday, but in every breath. Light never asks to be seen. It simply continues. Light does not wait for recognition. It does not pause to ask if its presence is noticed, applauded, or even believed. It moves forward, softly, constantly, without question, across galaxies, through darkness, around corners, beneath doors. It travels, not to impress, but because that is its nature, to illuminate, to warm, to be. The sun does not demand thanks when it rises. A candle does not beg to be praised. A star, burning for eons in the cold, does not shrink when eyes are turned elsewhere. Light is not concerned with validation. It does not need to be witnessed to exist. It continues whether or not attention is given, whether or not it is understood. In this, there is a deep kind of wisdom, a freedom, the kind that does not cling to outcome, that does not chase approval. Just as rivers flow toward the sea without audience, light moves through time with quiet purpose. It finds its way into the smallest cracks, the hidden corners, the forgotten rooms. It knows that its value is not in how widely it is seen, but in how honestly it is given. Some light is brilliant and bold. It paints skies, opens flowers, awakens mornings. Other light is subtle, the kind that glows from beneath leaves, the kind that catches dust in the late afternoon, the kind that lingers on the edge of water at twilight. Neither is greater. Both belong. There is light that warms, and light that reveals. There is light that guides, and light that transforms. Some light is fierce, cutting through shadow like a sword. Some is tender, softening everything it touches. But none of it demands attention. It simply continues, faithful to its own unfolding. And even when blocked, by clouds, by walls, by grief, light does not stop. It bends, it reflects, it waits, it finds another way. It is not fragile. It is not in need. It is. That is enough. To witness light is to remember what does not need to shout to matter, what does not need applause to be real, what does not need to prove its worth to remain steady. In the presence of true light, something ancient within begins to soften. The pressure to perform fades. The need to be seen dissolves. Only being remains. Because light teaches by example. Just continue. Be what you are. Let your presence speak. Let your radiance exist even when unseen. And in time, everything that needs to find the light will. Not because it demanded to be found, but because it continued, quietly, until it was. Not every song is meant to be heard by the whole room. Some melodies are not written for crowds. They are not designed for choruses, or applause, or dancing feet. They are made for silence, for a single heart, for a solitary moment when the world grows still and a sound moves through it like breath through dust. These are not the songs played on stages or broadcast through speakers. These are the ones hummed in kitchens, in forests, in dreams. Not every song needs to be shared widely to matter deeply. Some are private devotions, sung for memory, for mourning, for love that lives quietly beneath the surface. A single note that holds the weight of an entire story. A simple tune that never escapes the room where it was born, but fills it completely. There is a beauty in the hidden song, in the melody not meant for mass consumption, the one created not for approval, but for healing, for remembering, for release. It may never be recorded, it may never be performed, but in the moment it exists, it is everything. And sometimes, the most meaningful songs are the ones that come unplanned. A fragment of humming beneath breath. A tune remembered without knowing when it was first heard. A voice breaking softly in the quiet hours. These songs do not ask to be captured. They ask only to be felt. Art does not owe the world visibility. Expression does not owe the world explanation. There is a sacredness in what remains unseen, in what is created for its own sake, for the way it feels to hold it, for the way it moves through the body like a river through shadow. Some songs are prayers without language. Others are farewells never spoken aloud. The world often teaches that worth is measured by reach. That meaning is tied to audience. But the truth is quieter. It says, what is true does not need to be heard by many to matter fully. A whisper can carry the weight of a symphony. A song sung in solitude can heal a wound that crowds would overlook. Not every song finds ears, but some were never meant to. They were meant to be sung into the dark, into the trees, into the soft breath of night. They were meant to exist for the one who sings them, and the one they remember, or mourn, or forgive. And even if the room never hears it, even if the voice never leaves the lips that formed it, the song lives. It echoes in places no one can name. It lingers in time. It becomes part of the air. The silence around it becomes richer, changed by the music it once held. The most sacred songs are often the least shared, not because they are weak, but because they are whole. The breaking often reveals what was always strong. There is a moment in every life when something cracks, a soundless shatter, a splitting down the center of what was once whole. It may come quietly, like paper tearing under pressure, or all at once, like glass meeting stone. A relationship ends. A belief dissolves. A hope vanishes. What once held together no longer can. And in the space that follows, silence. Breaking is often mistaken for ending, for failure, for the moment when strength gives way and surrender becomes defeat. But there is another truth that lives beneath the surface of the fracture, one not visible at first glance. Breaking does not always destroy. Sometimes it reveals. Strength is not always loud. It does not always come in the form of resistance. It is not just endurance, or the ability to hold everything without faltering. Sometimes, strength is found in what rises after everything has fallen, in what continues to breathe in the ruins, in what softens instead of hardening, in what chooses, again and again, to remain open. A tree struck by lightning may lose its tallest branch, but the roots below reach deeper. A mountain may crumble at its edge, but the core remains unmoved. The breaking does not erase what is true. It shows it. It strips away what was temporary, what was assumed, what was too fragile to last, and leaves behind what is real. Often, what breaks is not the self, but the shell, the illusion of control, the armor built to survive, the expectations inherited rather than chosen. And when those layers fall away, what remains is something quieter, something older, something unshakable. The essence, the center, the truth. There is strength in vulnerability, in allowing grief to be grief, in naming sorrow, in crying without apology. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that the soul is still alive and refusing to numb. It takes courage to feel fully, to not look away, to not run from the sharp edges of experience. In the breaking, there is also space. Space for something new to form, not in replacement of what was lost, but in response to it. A deeper kindness, a wider compassion, a softness that did not exist before. The cracks become places where light enters, not because pain is beautiful, but because truth is. Time may not erase the break, but it can soften the edges. What once felt like an ending begins to feel like an opening, not all at once, not in a neat arc, but gradually, subtly, a shift, a breath, a deeper understanding of what was always strong, even before it was broken. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never shattered. They are the ones that shattered and returned, changed but whole, wounded but radiant, carved but shining. The breaking is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the truth. Night doesn't fall. It arrives with a hush, carrying peace folded in its arms. Night does not crash or tumble. It does not fall from the sky like stone or flame. It enters like breath, like a curtain drawn gently across the eyes of the world. The light withdraws slowly, and the hush begins, soft as snowfall, ancient as time. Shadows stretch, colors dim, and everything begins to exhale. There is no announcement, no alarm, just a gradual turning inward. A world preparing to dream. Night carries a different language, one not made of productivity or performance, one written in sighs and stillness, in the songs of crickets and the rustling of leaves. It speaks in tones the day forgets, tones that soothe rather than command, that invite rather than demand. Peace arrives, not like a trumpet, but like a blanket. In this hush, the senses change. The eyes see less, but feel more. The ears catch the faintest echoes. The pulse slows. The breath deepens. Thought softens into contemplation. And within that shift, something sacred is remembered. Rest is not idleness. It is restoration. The body knows. The soul knows. Only the world forgets. Day is for doing, for reaching, for becoming. But night is for being, for returning, for listening to the deeper rhythms that cannot be heard when the sun burns too loudly overhead. In the dark, truth does not disappear. It glows, like the moon, like embers in a fire, like dreams waiting behind the eyes. And the stars arrive, not as replacements for the sun, but as reminders, that even in absence, light continues, that even in silence, presence remains. They appear without announcement, without performance. scattered across the sky like forgotten prayers finally answered. The night carries all that the day forgets. The grief not spoken. The joy too quiet to be noticed. The longing too deep to name. These emotions do not shout. They whisper, and night listens. In sleep, the self unravels. The masks slip. The roles dissolve. The soul, untethered by expectation, floats. It visits memories. It receives messages. It remembers what it is beyond the body, beyond the story. Dreams are not distractions. They are dialogues. With the past, with the future, with the unseen. And even for those who do not sleep easily, night offers a kind of companionship, a stillness, a permission to feel, to grieve, to heal, to simply exist without doing. The hush of night is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the holding of everything in soft arms. The peace it brings is not from absence, but from presence without noise. A kind of sacred quiet that wraps itself around the heart and says, "Rest now. There is nothing to prove here." And when morning begins its slow return, it does not undo the night. It carries forward what was remembered in the dark, the insight, the softness, the stillness. These are the gifts night leaves behind, folded gently like linen on a bed, ready to be carried into the day. Night does not fall. It arrives, with peace, with patience, and with arms wide enough to hold everything. There is a kind of knowing that does not come from learning, but from remembering. Not all truth is discovered. Some of it is uncovered, not in libraries or lectures, but in silence, in stillness. In those moments when the world falls quiet and something deep within rises, not a thought, but a recognition. As if the soul, having waited patiently behind the noise, finally speaks in a language older than words. This kind of knowing does not come with explanation. It does not rely on logic. It is not earned through study or research. It arrives like a familiar scent, a glance across a crowded room, a sound that stirs something ancient in the bones. It does not feel new. It feels remembered. Some call it intuition. Others call it soul memory. Whatever name it takes, its presence is unmistakable. It does not argue. It does not prove itself. It simply settles into the body like warmth, like gravity, like truth. This knowing cannot be taught because it was never forgotten. It was only buried, beneath the layers of should and must, and logic and fear. Beneath the years spent trying to become something measurable, something visible, something approved. But beneath all that effort, it waited. And when the right silence opened, it returned. This is the kind of knowing that happens when standing before a vast mountain and feeling small in the best way. When watching a child sleep and realizing what matters. When grief comes, and despite the pain, something within whispers, "This is part of it too." No textbook explains that. No classroom prepares for it. It comes from the soul remembering itself. And it often appears when least expected. Not during the seeking, but during the surrender. While watching rain on glass. While walking a familiar path with different eyes. While holding someone's hand, saying nothing. These are the moments when the veils thin, and the original knowing returns. The self that existed before the story began is still here. Not behind, but within. Not lost, but layered. And when the remembering comes, it doesn't change everything instantly, but it changes what matters. Not because something new was gained, but because something essential was finally heard again. Some truths only arrive when nothing else is left to hold. There is a kind of truth that cannot be carried into a full life. It waits, patient, still, silent. It does not walk beside busy plans or loud ambition. It does not follow the footsteps of certainty or the rhythms of control. It waits at the end, of plans, of explanations, of belief in how things were supposed to go. This truth does not come with comfort. It comes with clarity. It arrives when the hands are empty, when what once mattered has slipped away, when the scaffolding has fallen, the map has blown away, and the questions have stopped pretending to have answers. It arrives in the quiet after surrender. At first, it may feel like nothing, like absence, like standing in a field where something once stood. But slowly, that emptiness begins to feel holy, not because it gives what was lost, but because it reveals what remains. Some truths cannot be spoken until everything false has been exhausted, until every false comfort has burned out, until every escape has become too small. These truths do not shout. They wait until the world grows quiet enough to hear. They are not easy truths, but they are real. Like the truth that love cannot always prevent loss, but it still matters. Like the truth that peace may not mean resolution, but presence. Like the truth that the soul was never looking to be fixed, only remembered. These are truths that do not come when everything is going well. They arrive when nothing makes sense, when the light has left the room and the breath is shallow and the answers have stopped pretending. They do not solve. They sit. They stay. They shine gently through the cracks. And somehow, in that breaking, they begin to rebuild something different. Not the old structure, not the old self. Something quieter, stronger, real. The hands that once clung begin to open. The heart that once resisted begins to soften. And the truth, once feared, is no longer heavy. Because it is no longer something to carry. It is something to live. Some forms of love ask for nothing in return, and still give everything. There is a kind of love that does not need to be named. It does not wear grand gestures or wait for recognition. It moves without asking, exists without proof, and gives without measure. This love is not loud. It does not announce itself with declarations or drama. It simply appears, in presence, in patience, in silence. It may arrive as a parent staying awake through the night, not for thanks, but because the heart doesn't know how to rest when care is needed. It may live in the way one friend listens to another break apart, not offering solutions, just being the room that holds the unraveling. It may breathe through strangers, offering warmth without expecting anything but the moment itself. This love does not seek balance. It does not keep score. It does not measure worth by response. It gives because it overflows, because its nature is movement, like rivers that flow even when no one watches, like flowers that bloom in empty fields, like stars that shine into endless night without asking to be seen. And in that giving, something eternal is revealed. This kind of love teaches that value is not in transaction. That meaning does not require return. That presence can be its own reward. The hand held, the note left, the door quietly left open, all become sacred because they are rooted not in need, but in generosity. It is not naive. It is not passive. It is strength softened into service, the kind of strength that survives not by defending, but by enduring, by continuing to care, even when the world forgets how. There is freedom in this love. It does not bind. It does not control. It allows the other to be as they are, to go where they must, to grow without possession. And still, it stays. Not always physically, but in intention, in memory, in the invisible echo it leaves behind. To love in this way is to become a witness, not a warden, to become a giver, not a keeper, to become a part of someone's story without needing to be the whole book. This is the love that changes lives quietly, not by taking, but by simply being there. Grace often appears where judgment once stood. At first, judgment feels like clarity, like control. It offers structure, certainty, a way to measure right and wrong, worthy and unworthy, safe and unsafe. It builds walls and labels doors. It divides the world into neat compartments. This is acceptable. This is not. This is enough. This is failing. But judgment does not create peace. It only delays it. It tightens the heart, sharpens the voice, narrows the vision. It offers no rest, only vigilance. Everything must be monitored, every flaw accounted for, every mistake punished. And then, something happens. The judgment reaches a limit. The scales stop balancing. The wall becomes too tall to maintain. And somewhere, quietly, almost imperceptibly, grace begins to grow. Grace does not arrive with arguments. It arrives with softness, often in the wake of exhaustion. After trying for too long to be perfect, after holding too tightly to what was never meant to be controlled, grace steps in when the heart can no longer bear the weight of judgment. It does not erase the truth. It deepens it. It sees the flaw and still offers kindness. It sees the mess and still brings light. It sees the failure and says, this too can be part of the beauty. Grace does not ask for improvement. It does not wait for apology. It does not require explanation. It simply offers a new way of seeing, a wider gaze, a slower breath, a second chance. Where judgment demands correction, grace offers connection. Where judgment isolates, grace invites. Where judgment punishes, grace holds space. Grace is not permission for harm. It is recognition of humanity. It does not excuse. It embraces. It does not forget. It forgives. And in doing so, it allows something miraculous to happen. The heart, once hardened by criticism, begins to soften. The eyes, once narrowed in suspicion, begin to open. The soul, once closed off in fear, begins to expand again. Grace often comes in the quietest moments. A smile exchanged despite the hurt. A gentle word spoken after long silence. A decision to stay, or a decision to leave, made not in anger, but in love. These are the holy places where grace breathes. And once it enters, judgment no longer fits the same way. It becomes too small, too heavy. Grace, in contrast, is light. Not because it ignores reality, but because it trusts that compassion can coexist with truth. Where once stood judgment, sharp, final, rigid, grace now blooms. Soft, enduring, free. 45. Even silence has a memory. It carries what words cannot. There is a kind of silence that speaks louder than anything ever said aloud. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, when no one speaks, because there is nothing left to prove, because the truth is already shared, because everything that needed to be felt is already understood. Silence is not the space between words. It is its own language. It remembers. It remembers the way eyes met at a distance and chose not to look away. It remembers the weight of unsent letters, the breath held in doorways, the words rehearsed in the mind but never spoken. It holds the laughter that ended too soon and the goodbye that came too late. It cradles the apology never asked for and the forgiveness given in solitude. Silence doesn't forget. It echoes the things words could not carry. Words can break. Words can bend under pressure. But silence absorbs. It lingers. It seeps into the walls of a room where something sacred or sorrowful happened. And years later, it still hums with the memory. Some silences are heavy, the kind that live in hospital rooms or old bedrooms, or between those who once knew how to speak easily, but now cannot find a way back. These silences do not shout, but they weigh down the air. They remind that connection, once frayed, leaves behind a shape that does not fade. Other silences are holy, like the ones beneath the trees just after it rains, or in the pause between a song's last note and the applause that follows. These silences are not emptiness. They are fullness. They are the space where meaning settles in, where the soul has room to breathe again. Silence does not need translation. It is understood across every language. A mother's hush, a friend's stillness beside grief, a moment of awe when the sky opens wide with stars. These require no words to explain. They are felt with the entire being. And silence has memory, because presence has memory. The self remembers how it felt in that quiet, when something inside shifted, when clarity came not through thinking, but through simply being, when everything slowed enough to be heard beneath the noise. Even in relationships, silence tells stories, between sentences, between years, between people. A pause after a question can reveal more than the answer. A held breath can say more than 1,000 apologies. A quiet room can carry more intimacy than a crowded conversation. Not all silence is peaceful. Some of it cuts, some of it isolates, but even in its sharpest forms, it holds memory. The silence after a slammed door, the silence that falls when trust breaks, the silence that echoes when someone is missing. These silences do not lie. They tell the truth no one wanted to name. And yet, in all its forms, silence invites. It creates space for reflection, for healing, for presence. It holds grief without rushing it. It gives love a place to rest. It opens the door to the sacred, because the sacred rarely enters through noise. Silence does not beg to be heard. It simply waits to be felt. And when it is, it leaves behind something the heart will always remember, even when the words are long gone. 46. Peace is not found in control. It arrives when control is no longer needed. The search for peace often begins with the desire to fix, to change the world, to manage circumstances, to control the outcomes of things that cannot be guaranteed. The mind spins strategies. The hands grip tightly to routines and roles and rules. If everything can be held in place, maybe peace will come. If everything can be made perfect, maybe the soul will rest. But control is not peace. Control is tension disguised as order. It is the constant monitoring of what might go wrong, the exhausting task of managing a world that was never meant to be held by one mind, one heart, one set of hands. And no matter how tight the grip becomes, something always escapes. Something always shifts. Because life was not designed to sit still. Peace does not arrive because everything is finally in place. It arrives when the need for everything to be in place dissolves. When the self is no longer chained to outcomes. When the breath deepens, not because the world is fixed, but because it is no longer being fought. There is a moment in surrender, not dramatic, not desperate, but quiet, when the truth settles in. Not everything can be changed, but not everything needs to be. And in that realization, peace enters, not as a reward, but as a presence. It does not come from force. It comes from trust. Not blind trust, but the kind that rises when everything else has been tried, and the heart, tired of fighting, finally softens. The kind of trust that lets go, not because it has given up, but because it has come home. Peace is not passivity. It is clarity. It is not giving into chaos. It is choosing stillness within it. It is not about ignoring responsibility. It is about releasing the illusion that control was ever the source of safety. The sky does not control the wind. The ocean does not control the wave. The tree does not control the seasons. And still, they exist. Still, they thrive. Still, they remain part of something vast and ancient and alive. Peace flows the same way. It arrives in the spaces where control has stepped aside, where acceptance has opened the door, where presence has taken the place of planning. And peace is not fragile. It is not dependent on silence or stillness outside. It can live in the middle of noise. It can rise in the middle of loss. It can anchor the heart even as the world turns upside down. not because it changes what happens, but because it changes the relationship to what happens. The one who no longer seeks to grip the world tightly becomes free to move with it, to bend with the storm, to breathe through the unknown, to remain whole in the shifting. Peace arrives not when life is finally controlled, but when control is finally released. 47. Some doors are meant to remain closed, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Not every door must be opened. Not every path must be walked. The soul knows this long before the mind catches up. Some spaces are sacred precisely because they are not entered. Some memories, some questions, some what-ifs, left unopened like old letters never meant to be read, sealed with the silence of knowing when enough is enough. The world often urges toward curiosity, conquest, exposure. Find out, open it, dig deeper. But not everything hidden is waiting to be revealed. Some things remain closed not because they are secrets, but because they are sanctuaries. And reverence is not fear. It is understanding that value is not always found in access. That meaning can live in mystery. That presence does not require possession. Some doors carry the weight of old choices. Others hold the remnants of grief that has already been honored. To open them again would not deepen the truth, only disturb the peace. There is no virtue in endlessly revisiting what has already taught its lesson. Healing is not measured by how often the wound is touched, but by the freedom to walk without needing to reopen it. Other doors are those the heart knocks on late at night. What could have been? What might have happened? What if? These doors open into echo chambers, futures that never came, alternate lives never lived. It is tempting to step through, to chase the shadow. But often, stepping back from that threshold is an act of wisdom. To say, this moment is enough. This life is full. To turn from the illusion and return to what breathes. Some doors are thresholds to versions of the self that no longer need attention. An identity shed. A chapter closed. The temptation to revisit is strong, not for clarity, but for familiarity. But not everything lost is meant to be found. Some versions of the self were meant to be outgrown. The door remains, not for re-entry, but as a reminder. That was then. This is now. And there are doors that protect what is not ready, ideas still forming, emotions still soft, seeds still waiting for the right season. These doors close not out of fear, but out of timing. To open too soon is to risk the sacredness of emergence. There is no rush. The right moment comes, and when it does, the door opens of its own accord. Reverence is knowing when not to enter, when to bow instead of press, when to stand still in front of a threshold and whisper gratitude without passing through. Some mysteries are complete in their silence. Some truths do not need to be uncovered to be understood. And in honoring these doors, by not opening them, a deeper freedom is found, a gentleness, a trust that not everything needs to be seen to be sacred. Some doors are not meant to be passed through. Some are meant to be bowed before. 48. There is a kind of beauty that asks for nothing, not even to be noticed. Not all beauty calls for witness. Not all grace stands in the light. Some beauty simply exists, quiet, unwavering, complete in itself. It does not ask to be seen. It does not ask to be named. It asks for nothing, and yet it is no less radiant. There is a flower that blooms where no footsteps fall, a bird that sings to no audience, a tree that grows in the corner of a forgotten field, offering its shade to no one, its fruit to the earth itself. This beauty does not decorate. It belongs. It is not a performance. It is presence. In a world shaped by attention, beauty is often confused with spectacle, with the curated, the captured, the shared. But true beauty does not perform. It does not need an audience. It does not require a frame. It simply is. It exists in the way snow falls on rooftops before morning wakes, in the hush of fog moving over water, in the single thread of gold in an old woman's hair. It lives in chipped paint, in wrinkles, in silence. It lives in places no one bothers to look, and it asks nothing. No validation, no response, no preservation. Its value is not tied to reaction. This kind of beauty is the most enduring because it is free. It does not worry about time. It does not fear fading. It exists for the sake of existing. A moment of grace that does not depend on being understood to matter. It can be found in the way someone hums to themselves while folding laundry, in the way hands move across old piano keys, not to impress, but to feel. In the way a person stares out a window for a long time and smiles at nothing. It is not always obvious. Sometimes it is passed by, missed entirely. But that does not lessen it. Beauty does not diminish just because it goes unseen. The ocean does not shrink when no one is watching. The stars do not shine less brightly when eyes are closed. There is humility in this kind of beauty, a quiet strength. It does not shout or shine with arrogance. It is soft, and in its softness, it teaches something the loud world forgets, that worth is not given from the outside. That silence can be luminous. That existence is enough. To witness it is to remember a deeper way of being, a way not based on performance, but presence, not on approval, but essence. And in that remembering, the soul breathes a little more freely. Not all beauty seeks attention. Some beauty simply is. And in its being, it becomes the most sacred thing of all. 49. Sometimes the most important journey is the one that leads inward. There are roads paved across continents, trails carved into mountains, flights charted to distant lands. But there is another kind of path, quieter, without markers, without maps, the kind that leads not outward, but inward. It does not begin with motion, but with stillness. Not with planning, but with a question. Not with a goal, but with a pause. This journey cannot be measured by miles or minutes. It winds through memory, silence, longing, breath. It moves through the layers that living built up, peeling each one back until something ancient and tender is touched. It passes by the noise of the mind and descends into the soft pulse of being, where truth does not need to be named to be known. This journey leads through grief, long silenced, joy, long hidden, and versions of self that were once abandoned in favor of approval. It does not require distance, only depth. It does not ask for answers, only presence. It is the journey of remembering what was forgotten, of becoming what was always there, of coming home to the quiet fire inside. And though the world may not see the traveler's steps, they are every bit as sacred. Because once the journey inward begins, everything changes, not all at once, but completely. 50. The end is not the closing of something. It is the opening of what's next. The world tells stories of endings as if they are final, as if they mean silence, emptiness, absence. But the truth is softer and deeper. Endings are not walls. They are thresholds. They are spaces where what was makes room for what will be, not with violence, but with stillness, not with closure, but with invitation. The last page of a chapter does not erase the ones before. It prepares the hand to turn the next. Every goodbye echoes with the sound of something new unfolding. And while the heart may feel the pull of grief, there is also the hush of something waiting, just beyond the silence, just behind the door. The flower wilts so the seed can fall. The day fades so the stars can rise. The breath exhales so another can begin. The soul knows how to move with these rhythms, knows how to bow to what is ending, and then rise again, not as what was, but as what is becoming. Endings are not losses. They are beginnings in disguise. And peace comes not from holding on, but from knowing when to let go. Because nothing truly ends. It only changes form. It only steps out of sight to become something else. Something new. Something next. 51. Sometimes the answer is not another step forward, but a deeper breath where you stand. The world celebrates momentum. Movement is praised. Action is rewarded. There is a hunger for forward motion, for measurable steps, for visible progress. One foot in front of the other. Keep going. Push through. Make it happen. Become. But there are moments, quiet, sacred moments, when the most profound wisdom is not found in motion, but in stillness. When the answer is not in the next step, but in the next breath. When the way forward is not about walking, but about pausing, softening, listening. There is a kind of clarity that cannot be chased. It does not reveal itself in speed. It does not bloom under pressure. It waits, in the hush between thoughts, in the silence beneath the striving. It lives in the breath that no one notices, the inhale that does not grasp, the exhale that does not resist. It arrives when movement stops pretending to be direction. To pause does not mean to give up. To pause means to return, to come back to the body, to the ground, to the sacred rhythm that lives beneath all noise. In this breath, the mind softens its questions. In this breath, the heart no longer needs permission to feel. In this breath, time expands, and what once felt unreachable becomes intimate, clear, alive. The breath is not small. It is not weak. It is the first act of life, and the last. It is the rhythm of the universe moving through the chest, the invisible thread that binds flesh to spirit. It does not rush. It does not ask. It simply continues, faithfully, quietly, offering a return every time the world forgets how to be still. And stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the presence of awareness. A breath taken with presence becomes a doorway. It opens what rushing cannot. It reveals what striving conceals. It says, the ground beneath is enough. The moment is enough. This, right now, is enough. There is nothing to prove in this breath, nothing to perform, nothing to solve. Just air moving through lungs. Just life unfolding without being pushed. The breath teaches a different kind of progress, one that deepens instead of advances, one that roots instead of reaches, one that transforms not by doing, but by being. Some answers live only here, in the pause, in the breath that softens the jaw, in the stillness that loosens the spine, in the exhale that lets go of needing to become something more. The world may not see the shift, but the soul feels it. Not a step forward, but a deeper breath, and everything changes. 52nd. Even the stars need darkness to be seen. Light does not cease in the presence of shadow. It is revealed by it. The stars have always been there, burning quietly in the fabric of the cosmos, long before any eye turned upward to see them. They wait, not for permission, but for the right moment, for the day to dim, for the noise to settle, for the sky to soften. And when the darkness finally arrives, they appear, not suddenly, but faithfully, one by one, like truths gently unfolding. Stars do not compete with the sun. They do not ask to be noticed. They do not dim themselves in daylight. They are simply hidden, not absent, not erased, hidden by brightness, hidden by busyness, hidden by the light that fills every space with its insistence. But when darkness comes, they shine. Because darkness does not destroy light. It makes it visible. And so it is with the light within. It is not gone when times grow hard. It is not lost when the path becomes uncertain. It is not broken when the spirit feels buried beneath sorrow. It is still there, quiet, ancient, waiting. Waiting for the mind to stop racing. Waiting for the noise to fall away. Waiting for the night to come. Not because the night is cruel, but because the night is honest. The stars teach that not everything sacred reveals itself in comfort. Some beauty needs silence to be seen. Some truths need solitude. Some light only appears when everything else has faded. The sky becomes its canvas, not in midday brilliance, but in midnight hush. Darkness is not the enemy of growth. It is the space where growth begins. The seed is not harmed by soil. The womb is not a prison. The cocoon is not a grave. In these dark places, transformation happens, quietly, invisibly, faithfully. Even the stars understand this. They do not rush the night. They wait for it. And when it comes, they answer with light. There are moments in life when everything familiar disappears, when certainty fades, when loss becomes the only companion. In those moments, it is easy to believe the light is gone. But the stars say otherwise. They say, "Look again. Wait. Be still. The light is still here. It never left. It is only now beginning to be seen. And when it appears, it does not scream. It does not burn the eyes. It whispers. It invites. It shines. Not in defiance of the dark, but through it. The stars are not ashamed of the night. They rise because of it. They become visible because of it. They become necessary because of it. And so does the soul. The light within is not proof of perfection. It is proof of endurance, of patience, of sacred timing. It does not always show itself in the day, but in the night, it becomes everything. And in that night, the heart learns something the day could never teach. That light does not disappear. It only waits. And when the darkness comes, it finally shines.